Hi guys, it is me, Charles Leclerc, and here I am now on my Practice 2 watch-along stream. Thank you guys if you have jumped over from the Practice 1-1 to this Practice 2 watch-along. Hello to everyone who is, or not everyone, but to anyone who is just tuning in for this stream for the first time today. Hello to you all. Hopefully, no matter what time it is you're in your part of the world or where you're from, hopefully you're all having as best a day as possible. And great to have you all here now for the Practice 2 watch-along. By the way, the reason the timer is not on the screen to count down until Practice 2 is because in a moment I'm about to play a video. I guess you could call it a break video, which normally I play, so I can take a break and also you guys can have something to watch. And I'll also get into a bit of discussion with you guys in regards to the topic of the video as well. So I will be cutting to that video pretty soon. But yeah, great to see all of you guys here for the Practice 2 watch-along. And you don't need to worry now about going to a different stream or a different page for, to watch me, because I'm going to be now streaming on this, stream link, whatever you want to call it, for the next, 3 hours, 15 minutes. So, yeah, you don't need to really go anywhere now at all. But, yeah, that'll be the last time you guys will have to do that this weekend. Next weekend, you may have to do it on the Friday practice day, again. We'll have to see how that all shakes out. But yeah, the rest of this weekend, it'll just be me streaming in one place continuously as normal. And just a reminder quickly, tomorrow, so yeah, today I'm going to be streaming until Practice 2, or until Practice 2, and of course to watch along Practice 2 as well for the next 3 hours and 15 minutes this stream will be going on for. Then, tomorrow, I'll be going live at 6 PM UK time, firstly for the qualifying preview, then at 7:45 PM UK time until 9 PM, I'll be doing a watch-along for Practice 3, 9 to 11 PM will be the build-up to qualifying, 11 PM UK time till midnight will be the qualifying watch-along, and then for about half an hour at least after the qualifying session is finished, I'll be reacting with you guys to qualifying itself. So, yeah, just letting you know what the plan is for tomorrow. And for Sunday, I'll get more so into that tomorrow when we actually get closer to race day. I don't want to jump too far ahead of myself. But, yeah, that is the plan for tomorrow. And hopefully you guys can join for that. But, yeah, still plenty coming your way today for this Practice 2 stream. And we've got an hour and 40 minutes until Practice 2 begins. Again, I will get the timer on screen in, quite a few minutes time after this video I'm going to play in a moment does end. Then I'll get it on screen for you guys. One thing I will do though quickly before we get into that particular video is, in case anyone wasn't around for my Practice 1 stream, let's just quickly get into the results of Practice 1. So, Carlos Sainz ended up quickest by a couple tenths of a second from Max Verstappen second. Hamilton was third with Stroll fourth, Perez fifth, Alonso sixth, Russell seventh, Gasly eighth, Norris ninth, and Vettel in 10th. And then the rest of the order, Ocon, Zhou, Albon. Oh, hold on, I've grabbed the wrong thing. Ocon, Zhou, Albon, Tsunoda, Schumacher, Schwartzman, Palou. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly, but I'm also thankful I won't have to pronounce it again. Teo Porcher 18th, and then Sargent 19th, and Antonio Giovinazzi in 20th. Giovinazzi only did 4 laps and didn't even come out onto track after his little crash in the early stages of first practice. So those are the results of Practice 1. And unfortunately, I couldn't find quickly any pictures to save and compile in a for a slideshow, which I might still be able to try and do whilst this video plays in the background. But yeah, for the moment I'll still have to put these images from the last Grand Prix on show until either after after this break video plays, or tomorrow. We'll have to see what happens with that. But yeah, what I'm going to do in a moment is I'm going to play this break video, and then I will get into some proper discussion with you guys after it's played as to the topic of the video. Now, The topic of the video is me predicting the futures of Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, Lewis Hamilton, and so on and so forth. Plenty of drivers on the grid's careers from now until the end of this decade. So that is what the video is about. It is quite long. It's 42 minutes long, I think it is. So, yeah, it is quite long. It will give me quite a bit of a break. But it is quite a good video, I think. And, yeah, I'll be playing it on stream in just a second. And what I want you guys to do is, as the video plays, let me know your thoughts in regards to what I'm having to say. And let me know what you think of, you know, the certain drivers that I talk about and what you think their futures will be in F1. Do you think Verstappen will dominate F1 from now on? Do you think, do you think Leclerc, Russell, Norris can win world championships? What do you think will happen with Lewis Hamilton in his the rest of his career? And plenty of other drivers as well. Let me know as I, go on in this video. I'll quickly play it to see if you guys can hear it. Hear it good enough? Let me just play it quick. What we are going to do today is, as it says on the title of this video, we are going to predict the future. Right, there you go. Let me know quickly. Just say yes or, yeah, just put something that, shows me that you guys can hear that correctly and that there's no issues. And then, yeah, I'll play that for you guys and then I'll be back on the other side of it. So, just wait to see if any of you guys post in chat confirming whether you could indeed hear that all okay. And yeah, just type yes in the chat and that'd be fine. And I'm going to quickly look on Twitter to see if there's any news I could bring you guys quick before we get into this little clip. And just seeing something, apparently according to Sky Germany, they had the Williams team boss talking to them, and he said that in 2020, which was a trial year for the budget cap, teams were allowed to send their data to the FIA so that they can check if the rules were understood correctly. He said Williams have done it, he doesn't know if others did. So, yeah, just letting you guys know that. And the reason, by the way, Giovinazzi didn't return to the track is because the damage to his car was too bad. Turbo sound prediction. Hold off on those predictions. Hold off on them. Right, so Rob's giving a thumbs up. So I think I'll just go ahead and play this clip. Again, it's 40... I think it's about 42 minutes long. And it'll give me a break and it'll give you guys something to watch because there's nothing else really to talk about in between, the two practice sessions. Let me know, guys, what you think of what I have to say when I am talking in this clip about what I'm talking about. And let me know what you think is going to happen for the futures of these certain drivers. And I'm sure as this little clip plays that Rook, my moderator in chat, will post a link to the video if you want to go check it out for yourself at any moment in time. So I'll play this clip and then I'll see you guys on the other side of it. So guys, here we are, and what we are going to do today is, as it says on the title of this video, we are going to predict the future of the current Formula 1 grid between the start of 2023 until the end of 2029. Again, I am not going to, as it says in the description of this video, I am not going to go through every single driver on the grid. It's going to be most of the grid that I go through, and also a driver that will be on the grid next season I will mention as to his future in Formula 1. So that's what we're going to be getting into in today's video. And of course, we will start at the very front of the field and start with the man who is about to win his second Drivers' World Championship. And that is, of course, Max Verstappen. Now, given how this new set of regulations, this new era of 2022 has begun with Red Bull and Ferrari clearly having the two best cars and Red Bull being the best team in Formula 1, because not only do they have a car quick enough to win a championship, but obviously operationally they are much better than Ferrari. Red Bull will be the team to beat between now and the start of 2026. So Max Verstappen in my view, will have, by the end of 2025, probably 2 more championships, which will make him a 4-time world champion by the end of 2025. Of course, he's going to win the championship this year. By the time this video has been released, this is being recorded before the Singapore Grand Prix, but by the time this has been released, he has, I'm guessing, won his 2nd world championship. So, yep, he'll be a 4-time world champion at the end of 2025. After 2026, though, it is going to get a little bit more difficult for Max Verstappen. The reason is because Red Bull, at the moment, don't actually absolutely know what their plan is engine-wise from 2026 on. Will they partner back up with Honda? Will they build their own power units? Will they maybe do a deal with Porsche? We don't know yet. Or, actually not Porsche, maybe Audi. We don't know. We don't know what their official plan is when it comes to the 2026 regs and what power units they're going to have. And I think that will cause them to be not as dominant and not as great after 2026. And I think we'll see certain other team, Mercedes, bounce back in 2026 with those new regs, because we know with new engine regs, Mercedes do tend to do pretty well, as we know from the past. And I think Mercedes, even in this current era, will bounce back. So after 2026, things will get more difficult, but I do think he'll win another world championship between 2026 and the end of the decade. Of course, his contract at Red Bull ends at the end of 2028, which is pretty much at the end of this decade. So Max Verstappen, in my view, will be the best driver in this decade and clearly the driver to beat. As I'll get into in a few moments' time, Lewis Hamilton, even though he is still right on at least Max Verstappen's level right now, still for me, Lewis Hamilton is the absolute best driver on the grid. Max is going to be, for the future, the one to beat. There is no doubt about that. And again, for the next 2 or 3 years, definitely Red Bull are going to be very hard to stop. And there's only one team that can stop them, which is Mercedes-Benz. But let me get into this graphic, which displays how I think, or what position Verstappen will be in at the end of the 2020s decade. So, in 2029, he will be a 5-time Drivers' World Champion, in my view. He will stay at Red Bull for the entire decade. Even when he gets to 2028, I think he'll probably just sign a new contract. I don't see Max Verstappen driving for another team, to be honest. The only other team I can see him joining is Mercedes at the end of his contract, again, in 2028. And by the end of this decade, he will have 75 to 80 race wins. That's an approximate. I'm not going to sit here and try and predict an exact number because that would be crazy to do. But I think he'll have around 75 to 80 race wins. At the moment, has about 31. And again, I'm recording this before the Singapore Grand Prix. And we'll have about 35 to 40 pole positions by the end of this decade as well. And what this will mean, if he does end the decade in this position, he will be able then to go into the 2030s. And in 2030, I think he'll be... How old will he be? 32, 33, something like that. So he'll probably have, if he still wants to keep going to break, Lewis Hamilton's records, he would probably have a good, 5-6 years left, with Verstappen at least. He will then be in a very good place to then become, statistically, the greatest driver of all time. Of course, that is a long way away, Max Verstappen getting into that position, but he will definitely be, by the end of this decade, already one of the greatest drivers of all time. Not the greatest, but in that top 4 or 5 drivers. There is no doubt about it. To be honest, at the end of this year, you could argue Verstappen is already in the top at least 15 best of all time, arguably top 10 greatest drivers of all time, given that we know he is going to go on and win more world titles. So Max Verstappen, again, is the man to beat, and that's how I think he will do for the rest of this decade. But what about his teammate, Sergio Perez? Well, for Sergio Perez, we know at Red Bull that he is in a similar position to Valtteri Bottas when he was at Mercedes, or Rubens Barrichello when he was at Ferrari, or even you could say David Coulthard when he was at McLaren and teammates with Mika Hakkinen. He is the loyal number 2 driver, basically, of the Red Bull team, and is, very consistent for Red Bull, very dependable for the Red Bull team. And I don't see, as long as Red Bull keep winning titles, which they will, at least for the next 3 to 4 years, I don't see Sergio Perez going anywhere. And my prediction for Perez is that he will keep racing for Red Bull until the end of 2026, or at least around that time. And then he will leave and probably finish his career at a smaller team, say a Williams or a Haas F1, maybe an Alfa Romeo that will become Sauber by that point. We'll see. But that's how I think Sergio's rest of his career will go. And at Red Bull for the next few years, he will probably collect 3 or 4 more race wins, a load more podiums, and go down as a very liked and great member of this team. No doubt about that. But now, let's get into the current Ferrari drivers and how I think the future of their careers will go. So we'll go on to Charles Leclerc, who we know currently is in a position of where at Ferrari, he's doing a great job in terms of his own driving, but the team, as they've done to Sebastian Vettel in the past, Fernando Alonso in the past, arguably you could say Kimi Raikkonen after Raikkonen's first world title win in his first stint at Ferrari. No matter how well those drivers, including Leclerc, have done at the Ferrari team, Leclerc just cannot overcome the amount of mistakes, the costly mistakes that Ferrari are making, which is ruining any chances that Charles Leclerc can have of winning a world championship. And as I have talked about in a previous video, which should be linked below in the description, Charles Leclerc is never going to win a championship at Ferrari. He needs to leave Ferrari if he is going to win a world title. And his contract, we know, ends at the end of 2024. And I think by then, Ferrari will, keep making these silly mistakes we've seen. They'll keep costing him race wins and good results. And if the Ferrari car is still as quick as it has been this season, they'll probably still keep costing him chances at winning a maiden world title. And by the end of 2024, I think Leclerc will be pretty much sick of being at this team and having so many chances thrown away by his team and being handicapped by his own team. And this is what I think will happen for Leclerc for the rest of the decade once he does leave Ferrari. So I think he will join the Mercedes team for 2025. As I'll get into in a moment with Lewis Hamilton, I think Lewis Hamilton will be leaving the Mercedes team and retiring before Charles Leclerc's contract does come to an end at Ferrari. And like I said, I think he'll join Mercedes in 2025 to partner George Russell. And then in 2026, I think Charles Leclerc will win his first driver's title. Even if he doesn't win it in that year, though, I think Leclerc will win. If he does join Mercedes, I think he will win a driver's title with them. And I do think Mercedes, for sure, will return to being a front-running, title-contending team. Just not as strong as they were between 2014 and 2021. I don't think Mercedes will ever be as strong as they were during that time period ever again. I don't think that's going to happen. But like I said, I think he'll join Mercedes in 2025 and then win his first driver's title the year after. And then by the end of the decade, I think he'll have about 25 race wins and end up with about 40 to 45 pole positions in total by the end of the decade. I think Leclerc at the moment has 5 race wins, again, before the Singapore Grand Prix. So another 20 wins between now and the end of the decade, I think seems pretty realistic in predicting that. And if he wants to win a world championship, Leclerc, that career path of joining Mercedes when his contract ends, if of course there is a seat available, that is the path he needs to take, because if he does not join Mercedes, obviously he's not going to go to Red Bull because that is Max's team, he will not win a world title. It's not going to happen. Ferrari are not going to win a world championship in this decade. It's not going to happen. They will have chances to win championships. I don't think they're going to be like a midfield team or anything like that. They'll probably have another 3 or 4 chances to win a championship, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, Ferrari are not going to be winning world titles, which is why Leclerc will have to leave Ferrari to win at least one world title in his career. What about his teammate, though, Carlos Sainz? Well, Carlos, at Ferrari right now, not being treated as a number 2 driver, but let's be honest, he is number 2 to Leclerc in terms of talent and skill and just raw pace at Ferrari currently. And I reckon as well he will, because he's now contracted to the Ferrari team until the end of 2024, I believe by then he'll be fed up of the Ferrari team as well, because I don't see Ferrari going really forward massively between now and when his contract ends at the end of 2024. And I don't think Sainz will be really that keen by that point to continue being second fiddle to Charles Leclerc. So I think Carlos Sainz will, after collecting probably another 3 or 4 race wins, I reckon he'll get in his career. Obviously, he's only won 1 race to date, again, before the Singapore Grand Prix, at the British Grand Prix, as you can see on your screen at the minute. But I do think he will collect probably another 3, 4, maybe 5 at most race wins, probably another couple pole positions and a load more podiums. But I think he will want to be more so the number 1, kind of like Daniel Ricciardo wanted to be when he left Red Bull at the end of 2018 and joined Renault, wanted to be more so the main focus at that team. That's what I think Carlos Sainz will want when, leaving Ferrari at the end of 2024. And this is how I think the rest of his career will go after that point. So, he will not feature in a World Drivers' Championship battle in this decade. I do need to make sure to point that out. And the reason is because, as I got into in a previous video, which you can check out on the channel, and it's a video about why Carlos Sainz just isn't an elite F1 driver, I don't see Carlos Sainz, unless he's the number 1 driver in a car that is the best on the grid, I don't see how Carlos Sainz wins a world championship or can consistently compete with the top drivers throughout the season. We've seen this season. He just cannot consistently fight with those drivers in every Grand Prix, or in 95% of Grand Prix, and I think he will end up just not being good enough to be in a world title fight for the rest of the decade, no matter what car really he is in, unless, like I said, he's in the best car on the grid and happens to be the best driver in that particular team. And like I said a few moments ago, he'll leave Ferrari when his contract ends, and I believe he will join Aston Martin for 2025, replacing Fernando Alonso, who I'll get into later, who I think at the end of 2024, which is when his contract, I think, is until. I know Alonso does have the option for a 3rd year, which would take him into 2025, but I think Alonso will actually retire from Formula 1 at the end of 2024, and that will lead to them replacing Alonso with Carlos Sainz. Aston Martin, though, I do believe will start to progressively, now that they've got some people acquired, obviously, from the Red Bull team and some other top teams as well, Aston Martin will start to get better, and I reckon by the end of this decade, Aston Martin will be at least a front-running team and will be a contender to a certain extent. So that's why I think Carlos Sainz will move from Ferrari to Aston Martin, and I think he'll do pretty well at Aston Martin and have a decent career with them. So that's what I see for Carlos Sainz going forward for the rest of the decade. Now, let's get on to the Mercedes drivers, and we'll start with Lewis Hamilton. And I'm going to keep it pretty simple when it comes to Lewis Hamilton. I think he will retire at the end of next season. Not because he's, demotivated or just isn't good enough anymore. Obviously, he is easily good enough and is still, for me, the best driver on the grid. If only he had a car that could properly compete with the other top drivers in Formula 1 right now, such as Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, who are in much faster cars on a consistent basis. But what I think will happen next year is Mercedes will bounce back and be title contenders next year, and Lewis Hamilton will get his revenge for 2021 and win an 8th World Championship, and then I think retire from the sport, because I think Lewis is the type of driver to retire on top, and I think that would be actually the best way for him to retire from Formula 1, to retire on top and go out absolutely, without a doubt, statistically or opinion-wise, as the greatest driver of all time. We'll get into how I think here with this graphic, just how I think it'll play out. So yeah, he'll win his 8th world title in 2023, then retire from F1, will go down as the GOAT statistically, and I think will retire with around 115 race wins, and around 110 pole positions, and 8 world titles. And yeah, as well, not only do I think he's the type of driver or type of person to retire on top, but also, if he was next year to win his 8th World Championship, why, in my view, why would you continue at that point? Because, I mean, he's, what, 37? 38 almost? I'm not sure of his exact age, but he is nearly 40 years old. And if he was to win his 8th world title next year, there's not anything else to accomplish. I mean, yeah, you could build some ground on the people behind you in the record books to make sure that your records last even longer. But, if you win that 8th world title, if you're Lewis Hamilton, I just don't see what else there would be to accomplish. And I think he would have pretty much, as a driver, completed Formula 1. So that's why I think he will retire at the end of 2023 with his 8th world title. And I have to just say, before anyone says anything, that I don't want him to retire at the end of 2023. I want him to keep going for years. I know he has said that he wants to keep going for years, but if he was to win an 8th World Championship next season, I think his opinions on that might change. But yeah, I don't hope that he retires next year. I don't hope that at all. I want him to be on the grid for as long as he wants, because Lewis Hamilton being on a Formula 1 grid would be absolutely fantastic for Formula 1 and for the entertainment of Formula 1 going forward as well. But that's what I think is going to happen. We'll see if I am correct or not. But what about his teammate at the time, George Russell? Well, in with Lewis Hamilton retiring, in my view, and winning that 8th world title at the end of 2023, Russell, from that point on, going into 2024 and beyond, will now be the clear number 1 at Mercedes. Well, not the clear number 1, but he will be I guess you could say, the team leader. Even though I do think Charles Leclerc will join Mercedes in 2025, I still think Russell will be the team leader, even though Russell and Leclerc in 2025 will be of equal standing within the team in terms of driver status. There's obviously not going to be a number 1, number 2 driver type status within that team. Kind of like at the minute with Hamilton and Russell, they both have equal status, but Lewis Hamilton is the team leader because he's been there longer out of the 2 drivers. I think that's how it will work with those 2. And in regards quickly to who will replace Lewis Hamilton for 2024, I think that will be, again, a temporary replacement, because I don't think that Toto Wolff will want to or will be able to find an instant replacement that is anywhere near the quality of Lewis Hamilton. I think it'll probably be Nick de Vries for a year replacing Lewis Hamilton, and then once Leclerc's contract comes to an end, or Lando Norris's contract comes to an end, which I know is in, I think, end of 2025, then I think that's when they would go for those type of drivers who would be able to get a lot closer to what they would have lost with Lewis Hamilton. Again, though, that is if Hamilton does retire at the end of 2023, like I think he will. But going forward after 2023, I think George Russell will be Max Verstappen's main challenger or contender for the rest of the decade. In my view, let's say Lewis Hamilton is not on the grid. I think Russell, I don't think he's the best driver on the grid if on the Formula One grid if there's no Lewis Hamilton. I still think it would be Max Verstappen, but I think he would be out of, say, himself, Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, whatever drivers behind, Piastri. I think George Russell is the best driver out of those group in terms of his talent, skill, and pace. I think he's the best driver that can challenge Max. Obviously, it does depend on whether the car is good enough, but I think he will be Max's main challenger for 2024, 2025, and then I think Mercedes will properly bounce back with the 2026 regs, which, to be honest, I think they'll probably start focusing on pretty soon, given that the current power units in terms of their development have been frozen. So give some time to focus a bit on 2026, as those regs will fly around quite soon enough. But let me get into this graphic just showing how I think Russell and the rest of the decade will go for him. So I think he will win 2 drivers' titles in both 2027 and 2029, respectively. Again, with the new 2026 regs, I think Mercedes will more so bounce back then. Like I said, with Lewis Hamilton, I think they will bounce back next year in being, title contenders and front-running race-winning contenders on a consistent basis again. But I think they'll be more stronger after 2026 than they are going to be in this current era before we get to those new regs in 2026. So I think he'll win 2 drivers' titles and have 2 titles by the end of this decade. And like it says there, I think he'll be Max Verstappen's main challenger from 2024 onwards. And I think he'll also remain at Mercedes for the rest of the decade and end up with 35 to 40 wins by the end of the decade as well. Obviously, at the moment, doesn't have any race wins. But yeah, by the end of this decade, I think he'll have quite a lot of wins. And to be honest, I think Russell will probably end his career as the second, third best British driver of all time. Obviously, Lewis Hamilton is probably always going to be the best British driver of all time. I don't think there's going to be many contenders ever for that status, but I think Russell could definitely go down as the second or third greatest British driver of all time. The talent, skill, pace, all of it is absolutely there for Russell, and if the car is at a world title contending level, which I think it will be from next year on, really for the rest of the decade, with Mercedes getting stronger again from 2026 on, then look out for George Russell, because I definitely think he will be a world champion. He has, I think, everything you need to be a world champion. Just doesn't have, at the moment, the car in 2022, and also his teammate is the greatest driver of all time, which is pretty hard competition. Lewis Hamilton hasn't exactly got worse, has he, in 2022. So yeah, look out for Russell in the next few years. But those are the top drivers from the top teams. Let's now get into some of the midfield teams and the drivers currently occupying those seats. We'll start with Lando Norris. I did say in an earlier video, I think the video I did about Lando Norris having the career that many don't think he'll have, that I think he'll have, if that makes any sense. I'll post the video in the description of this video, don't worry about that. But I kind of already alluded to the future of Lando Norris, at least for the next decade. I think he will stay at McLaren until the end of the decade. The reason is because by 2025, when his contract comes to an end, I don't think there'll be anywhere for him to go unless a new team, a new top team, suddenly appears that isn't Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull, which I don't think is massively likely, to be honest. And I think he'll stay at McLaren, probably sign another 3 to 4 year contract, and then be with them at least until the end of the decade. And what he will basically be is a driver that wins maybe a race or two, collects a load more podiums, but ultimately just doesn't feature consistently at the front of Formula One races. Not because he's not good enough. He's definitely good enough. He's already proven that. But because the McLaren team, in my view, will not be a proper front-running, title-contending team in this decade. I just don't see it happening. Now, I know I could be wrong because McLaren, they're building, I think, a new wind tunnel, and they are investing more in, some very important resources. I get that, and they definitely should improve on where they are now. But at the moment, we're seeing that they're already underperforming, given what resources they have currently. This year has been a bit of a disappointment, really, for McLaren, because they haven't really took that step forward that they really should have from last year, where I think last year was about the peak of what they could have done in that last little era of F1. But yeah, I just don't think McLaren will ever be, in this decade, a front-running, title-contending team. So that's what I think will happen with Lando Norris. It's a shame, but if he can find another team that can win championships that isn't Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull, then I think he's definitely got a good chance in the future. But what about his teammate for next year, Oscar Piastri? Oscar Piastri, obviously, he's joining McLaren for next year, and his contract is until the end of 2024. What I think will happen firstly with McLaren is, I think the first season at McLaren next year, I think he'll do a decent job. He won't be as good as Norris next year because Norris is already comfortable on that team. It'll be Piastri's obviously debut year, and Piastri, I don't think, except for the simulator, has really driven these cars. So yeah, it's going to be a tough year next year, but I reckon by 2024, I think we'll see him pretty much on similar pace to Lando Norris, because I think Piastri is very, very talented. And what I think will happen with Oscar Piastri is, I think he will, with McLaren, I think he will, sorry, my stream at the minute that I'm recording this video on is messing up quite a bit. Sorry about that. Piastri for McLaren, what I think will happen is he will be kind of like with Carlos Sainz in 2020. I think Piastri will be pretty much on the same pace as Norris. Maybe not as good as Sainz was in that year in 2020 with McLaren, obviously 2019 as well compared to Norris, but I think Oscar will be at a point by the end of 2024 where he will need to really join another team to really progress, because like I said, I don't think McLaren are really going to be going forward in the next few years, and I think if he really wants Piastri to become a front-running driver and compete for race wins and podiums and that lot, I think he'll have to leave McLaren. And that's what I think he'll do. I think at the end of 2024, after a good couple years at McLaren, I think he will leave them. And because, like I said earlier, I think Leclerc and Sainz will leave Ferrari, I think Oscar Piastri will join Ferrari. And I think he'll race for them and be their probably number one driver for 2025 onwards. That's what I think he'll be, or where he'll be going from that point onwards. And I think he'll then become a front-running driver. He'll be competing for wins, podiums, maybe in a certain couple years, he'll be competing for world championships, but because it's Ferrari, he won't win a world championship no matter how well he does. So that's what I think will happen with Oscar Piastri in terms of his next few years. And to be honest, as a career path, that would be a pretty good one, going from McLaren to Ferrari. And yeah, that's how I think it will go. Him getting to a point with McLaren where he's pretty much on equal pace of Norris, and maybe not as good as Norris, but very, very close to him. and I think will then want to break away and go to another team where he can be the number one driver. And if Ferrari were to lose Leclerc and Sainz at the end of 2024, then I think going to Ferrari would be probably the best option quite clearly for him. But let's get into the man he's replacing at McLaren for what do you call it, for 2023, Daniel Ricciardo. Now, in me trying to come up with my predictions for the drivers, it was very hard to determine what I thought was going to happen with Ricciardo. He's not going to be on the grid next year. I don't believe that is going to happen at all, unless it's been announced that he's going to be joining the Haas team or the Williams team or something like that. Again, obviously recording this before the Singapore Grand Prix. I think Ricciardo will probably be off the grid in 2023. And to be honest, I don't think we're going to see Ricciardo again after this year in Formula 1. I think he'll probably go to IndyCar. The only chance I see is in 2024, him joining, say, the Haas team. Maybe the Sauber team, but that does depend probably on where Valtteri Bottas is at that time, and whether Valtteri Bottas wants to stay with what would then become, Alfa Romeo to Sauber for 2024. We'd have to see what would happen in regards to that. But unfortunately, and it is very unfortunate to say this, I don't think Daniel Ricciardo will be on the grid after this season, because his performances in the last few months just have not been anywhere near good enough. And given some of the young talent out there and how good the grid is now, I just don't think there'll be really any places for him to fill. Again, the only places on the grid I can think of is maybe a Haas or a Sauber. Other than that, I'm not sure. I mean, maybe you could say Williams, but I think that would really depend on if Williams were properly a midfield team, not, touring around at the back of the field. But yeah, I think Ricciardo, after this year, sadly, is done in Formula 1. Now let's get on to Fernando Alonso. And pretty simple for Alonso. Obviously, he's joining Aston Martin for next year. What I think will happen is Aston Martin will get better next year, slightly, and then probably the year after. They'll start making steps up. There is no doubt about it. Aston Martin will start to improve. But because Fernando Alonso is impatient, and I don't think he'll want to wait around for 4 or 5 years for Aston Martin to become a front-running title-contending team, I think Fernando Alonso will retire at the end of 2024. And like I said earlier, I think his replacement at Aston Martin will be Carlos Sainz, who will be with Aston Martin probably for the rest of the 2020s decade. If he's going to stay on the grid past 2024, really, Fernando does need, or let's go back to that clip again of Fernando. Fernando really does need Aston Martin's progress to be a bit quicker than even they expect. Because if they, let's say Aston Martin, because obviously currently they're quite far down in the Constructors' Championship, if by the end of 2024 they're in a position where Alpine are now, which is 4th in the championship, I just don't see how Alonso would want to, keep waiting around and stick around, hoping that they become a front-running team. So they're going to have to make a bit more progress and start really, to bridge that gap between themselves and the front-running teams. But, that's just what I think is going to happen. I don't think he'll want to wait around forever. But we'll go on to his teammate quickly, Esteban Ocon. For Esteban, I think he will remain at Alpine for the rest of this decade. And I know that's quite ambitious to say, him remaining at Alpine for another, 6-7 years. But I don't see where he could go, really. I mean, if Lewis Hamilton does leave Mercedes at the end of 2023, maybe he could replace him for a year or two. But I just, other than that, I don't see where he could go. And Alpine, I think, definitely until the next set of regulations in 2026, I think Alpine will be pretty much where they are now, which is an upper midfield team. So I don't think there'll be really any massive reason for Esteban to leave. Obviously, it's a French team, so they want a French driver in their car, and he is one of the most premier French drivers out there. And I think Ocon, probably for the rest of the decade, if he does stay at Alpine like I think he will, he'll grab probably a couple podiums, maybe more than that, maybe a few podiums, more so than a couple. Maybe get another surprise race win, but I think Esteban Ocon will be stuck in the midfield from now on. And I think joining him at Alpine for next year and staying with him for quite a while will be this man, Pierre Gasly. I think he will join Alpine for next season, and I think Gasly will be an Alpine driver for at least 3, maybe 4 years, because again, French driver, French team, and as long as he performs well in Alpine or an upper midfield team, I don't see why Gasly would be in a desperate hurry to leave and go elsewhere unless Mercedes, Ferrari, or Red Bull had an opening. So I think Gasly will probably stay at Alpine until 2026 or 2027, and then move maybe to another midfield team, upper midfield team in F1. Maybe, you never know, in the future could go to McLaren, especially if Piastri does leave at the end of 2024. You never know, that could happen. But I think Gasly will be in the midfield, just like I said with Esteban Ocon. I just don't think those two are going to really go anywhere higher up the grid. But let's get into a couple final drivers in this, predicting the future of Formula 1. And the penultimate driver we'll get into is quickly Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas, I think, will remain at what is currently Alfa Romeo, soon to be Sauber. And I think, I've written down that I think he'll retire at the end of 2027. It will at least be around that time, 2025 to 2027, where he'll be, I'm not sure how old he'll be, but he'll be in his late 30s, I think, by that point, Valtteri. The reason I think he'll still be at that team is because he's still a good driver, consistent driver, still, when the car's good, pretty quick in qualifying. And with Audi probably coming on board in 2026, I think he'll probably want to stay around for that. So that's why I think he'll retire at the end of 2027. And I do think he will be joined by Théo Pourchaire at the Sauber team for 2024 onwards, replacing Zhou Guanyu, who I think just sadly won't do well enough to continue on the Formula 1 grid. But Valtteri Bottas, I think, will just stay in the midfield now, and he'll retire, like I said, in a few years' time. Finally, though, I just want to quickly go on to Mick Schumacher, because in regards to Ferrari, like I said earlier, I think it'll be Leclerc and Sainz leaving the Ferrari team. I just said a few moments ago that I think Oscar Piastri will replace one of them and be the number one on the team. And I think the number 2 or the other driver in that team will be Mick Schumacher. The reason is because Mick, I think, is I think he is a good driver. I think he is good enough for F1. I think he just needs more time, really, does Mick, in Formula 1. And I think he will eventually get to a point, say in 2024, where he is proving that he is definitely good enough for a move up the field. And I think from a PR standpoint and a money-making standpoint, I do think Ferrari are pretty desperate to get him in their car, because obviously it is Michael Schumacher's son. So I think it will be Oscar Piastri and Mick Schumacher racing for the Ferrari team from 2025 on. After that, who knows who drives for Ferrari, but to be honest, I haven't given who's going to be driving for the Ferrari team as much thought as to, say, the Red Bull and Mercedes teams, and the reason being is because no matter who drives for Ferrari, they're not going to win a championship, because the problems at Ferrari are deeper than just the drivers. We've had so many great drivers in the last few years, but as a team, they've just ruined their chances consistently. I guess I haven't really talked about who replaces Sergio Perez at Red Bull at the end of 2026. The reason I didn't talk about this was mainly because I think it will be someone who's not on the grid yet, or probably not even in F3 or F2 yet. Because obviously, the end of 2026, when he's, that's what I said would be the time when he would leave the Red Bull team. That is still quite a way away, that time. So yeah, I think it'll probably be whoever replaces him. I think he'll be someone who is not currently, obviously, on the Formula 1 grid, but probably not on the F2, F3, or maybe even F4 grid, to be honest. But whoever that replacement is, it will definitely be a bit worse than Max Verstappen. It's not going to be a driver that can, regularly compete with Max Verstappen and challenge him, because I don't see why Red Bull would go for a equal status between the two drivers at Red Bull, as long as Max Verstappen is at that team. But guys, let me know in the comment section of this video, what do you think of my predictions? And let me know your predictions for the drivers that I went through. The drivers I went through was what? Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Sainz, Hamilton, Russell, Norris, Piastri, Ricciardo, Alonso, Ocon, Gasly, Bottas, and Mick Schumacher, I think it was, that I all went through. Yeah, let me know in the comment section what you thought of my predictions for all of those drivers. And let me know what your thoughts are for those drivers and the teams as well going into the next few years in Formula 1. But guys, until my next video, has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye. So I think that video just ended there for you guys, and hopefully you did enjoy it. One thing I am going to do quickly though. So guys, here we, and I'll just quickly mute it there, is just remove it from my OBS software, so my stream, can run at a bit of a better speed. And one thing I will do quickly, so you guys can know, is when practice 2 will be getting underway, and it will be in 53 minutes from now. I think, yeah, about 53 minutes from now is when practice 2 will be getting underway. And hello to anyone who new who has joined since that clip begun about 45 minutes ago. Good to see you all here. And I have seen that you guys have posted plenty of comments in the chat in regards to that topic. So I will, for the next 30 to 40 minutes, probably, be going through your comments. Maybe all the way up until practice 2 does get underway. One thing I do want to quickly say, though, is whilst that video was playing, Christian Horner has now finally met the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, and I think they're now talking in the Red Bull motorhome, so we will see what the result is of those discussions and whether Red Bull still do a press conference maybe tomorrow morning to go through, what's happened here. And maybe they're going to work out a deal in regards to what the punishment is going to be. And obviously the FIA have offered Red Bull an accepted breach agreement, which would be Red Bull, basically doing a deal with the FIA about, not really kicking off about what the punishment is and just accepting it, basically, accepting what the punishment is. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, I just, a few minutes ago, whilst that video clip was playing, I just saw that on Twitter. So I'll keep you guys up to date, updated if there is any, update to that whole story and situation. Hopefully there is before the end of this weekend, but I still feel as though it's going to take a while to actually get to, us knowing the full facts of the situation and the punishment as well. But what I'm going to do in a moment is just read out all your comments in regards to that video I just played on stream. Before I do, though, if anyone new is watching to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because tomorrow I'll be live for 6.5 hours on the channel, starting at 6 PM UK time for my qualifying preview. Then from 7:45 PM UK time until 9 PM, I'll be doing a practice 3 watch along. 9 to 11 PM, I'll be doing a build up to qualifying. 11 PM UK time until midnight, I'll be doing the qualifying watch along. And then for at least half an hour after the session finishes, I will be doing a reaction to the session itself with you guys. So make sure to join me tomorrow for that, guys. And yeah, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for that content. And as well, for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button to help the channel grow. But yeah, for the next 45 minutes, say at most. Let's get into your comments in regards to what you guys thought of what I had to say and what you think of the futures of those certain drivers. So let's get into what you guys have to say. Turbo says Leclerc will win multiple championships after he replaces Hamilton in 7 years, after Hamilton has won his 12th world championship. That would be very impressive if Lewis was to win even 10 world titles, never mind 12. Vincent says Hamilton was looking good or no. Turbo saying Hamilton looking meh again. His car slow. Without the car, he can't win. It's just how F1 is. True. Darth Lord Raven says Hamilton should stop his career. It's better for him to leave it. He's had its top. I mean, yeah, there's definitely an argument to be made about that. But it does depend on if Mercedes, if Mercedes aren't able to get back up to the level they were at before this year, then there's definitely that argument to be made that maybe Hamilton should just retire because it's never going to be as good the rest of his career again as it was, when he obviously won his last world championship in 2020. So, yeah. I mean, I think he should still, keep going. Definitely, obviously, next year. And he will be racing, obviously, next year for Mercedes. We already know that. But if he was, as I predicted in that video, my prediction is that next year Mercedes will bounce back and he'll be winning the World Championship next year and then he'll retire on top. That, for me, would be the best way for him to go out on top because I think that's what he deserves. He's the greatest driver of all time and it would be the perfect ending to his story. It'd be, just like obviously Michael Jordan, his second retirement when he hit that championship winning shot in was it game 6 of the NBA finals in 1998. It'd be a perfect, what that for him was a perfect conclusion. Obviously he did ruin it a bit, Michael, by coming back into basketball about 2 or 3 years later, but for Hamilton, that if he did something similar in F1 next year or even in a couple years time, it'd be a perfect storybook ending and the ending he would deserve for sure. And obviously the ending that Michael Schumacher almost had in 2006, who obviously is also a 7-time world champion. He was very close to having that storybook ending in 2006, but then the final 2 races, it was just absolute implosion from Ferrari with the reliability issues they had at the very end of that season, which came as a surprise to everyone because Ferrari during that period were very, very reliable with their not just trackside performance, but their actual reliability as well. But let's see quickly some other comments here. Cars and Stuff says he'll hopefully have the car next year. Turbo says, that being said, I think the pundits are most likely correct, and it's going to be a bunch of championships in a row for Verstappen at least until 2026. Yeah, I think if you asked most people, like say if you asked most F1 YouTubers that cover Formula 1, the actual sport, rather than, doing the video game, I think if you asked them, I think most of them would say Max is most likely going to win at least 2 of the next 3 or 4 titles. Because it's just set up for him to do that. He's racing for a brilliant team, got a good car, and he's, at his absolute peak at the minute. And he could, you'd argue, get better. So, yeah. It's definitely on the table, I would say, for Max Verstappen. Turbo also says, I wonder if Leclerc will ever end up at Mercedes if and when Hamilton retires and Ferrari keep cocking it up. Yeah, obviously in my clip there I did predict that my prediction is that Leclerc will be a Mercedes driver replacing Lewis Hamilton long term, at that team. He won't be the direct replacement because my prediction is for Hamilton, like I said, to retire at the end of 2023 and then Leclerc to come into the Mercedes team in 2025. Because obviously Leclerc's contract at Ferrari ends at the end of 2024. But if there is a opening at Mercedes and Mercedes are a championship contending team and Leclerc, coming to the end of his contract, if he isn't seriously looking at Mercedes as an option, then for me, he's stupid. Because he's not going to win anything with Ferrari in their current state. It's just not going to happen. Ferrari are in a position and have been in a position for quite a number of years, but they are especially now in a position where no matter how good of a driver they have, they are not going to be world champions because they are just such a mess of a team. So, at this point, I don't think Leclerc should waste away, possibly the prime years of his career hoping for something to happen that isn't going to happen for a few years at least, which is Ferrari getting their act together and becoming a proper big, front-running championship-winning team. So, yeah, if I'm Charles Leclerc, I'm definitely not signing a new contract at Ferrari until at least the start of 2024 to see, where possible openings could be. And you never know, by 2024, we might have a new team fighting towards the front of the field that we didn't see coming. Maybe an Aston Martin. You never know, maybe a McLaren or an Alpine. So we'll have to see what happens with that. But it would be stupid for Leclerc to not consider his options instead of, blindly signing a new 5-year contract or 4-year contract with the Scuderia. And Turbo says, would be interesting to see Russell and Leclerc as teammates. Yeah, it would be a very good battle. And it would be a very close fought battle. Like I said in that clip, I think Russell would come out on top because I do believe that in the same team, and the evidence isn't really there fully at the minute, but I do believe, looking at their respective talent, that if George Russell and Charles Leclerc were teammates, I think Russell would be ahead of Leclerc. I think, like I was saying in that clip, once Lewis Hamilton retires and Fernando Alonso retires, I think George Russell is the closest competitor Max Verstappen will have, and the best driver on the grid. Or Russell will be the best driver on the grid, except for Max Verstappen. So yeah, it would be a great lineup, a very competitive one as well. Eric asks, do you think Lewis Hamilton will retire from all motorsports, or will he try to drive something different? I think with Hamilton, he'll probably just retire from everything when he retires from Formula 1. I don't see why he would, go and race in another series. I mean, you could maybe throw out, the possibility of IndyCar, but IndyCar, I mean, it has popularity in F1, in America of some sort, but it's not anywhere near as popular as Formula 1 is currently in America. And it just doesn't have enough eyes on it, I don't think, for Hamilton to be interested in racing in IndyCar. I think if a team in IndyCar offered him an absolute shit ton of money to race in the Indy 500 and Hamilton thought it was worth the risk, I think there's a lot more chance of that, him doing a one-off race, say, at the Indy 500 like Alonso did. But Alonso was obviously him doing the Indy 500 was more of a personal ambition rather than a payday. But yeah, I think if he's going to race in any other event than F1, then the only thing I could see, like I said, is IndyCar. Or not IndyCar, but the Indy 500. But only if he was paid like a stupid amount of money to do it. Right, let's find some other comments here. Turbo says, I don't see Hamilton going for the Triple Crown either. I don't see Hamilton having the guts to do high-speed ovals. I'm not saying he's a coward, but he's proven many times the deadliness. It has been proven many times the deadliness of ovals and F1 drivers not wanting to do them. Yeah, well, I think, wasn't it Michael Schumacher up 20 years ago came out with a bit of a famous quote saying, why on earth would I risk something, risk his own life to do something that he doesn't really need to do. I remember him saying that. I think when they came back to America and started racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway about 20 years ago, and I'm sure Hamilton probably has the same feelings. I know Sebastian Vettel does because he literally has talked about it. What's the point of doing it? Fernando Alonso, though, is just a psychopath, so that's why he doesn't care. I mean, Alonso's done was it the Dakar Rally? He did Indy 500, Le Mans. Like, Alonso will literally drive anything, anywhere. He absolutely loves motorsport. I mean, the other two do as well, but I think Alonso literally lives and breathes motorsport. He'll literally drive anything. Will Fernando. But, yeah, most likely Lewis Hamilton, I don't think is ever going to race in anything else, unless, like I said, he's offered a stupid amount of money to do it. Darth Lord Raven says, come on, he has had 7 world titles, now he's driving like what? My grandma, I would quit. Being third in P1 doesn't mean anything anymore. Well, being first in practice 1 doesn't mean anything, to be honest. But I think the way he's been this season, I think it's been overrated so much in terms of him apparently being terrible this season. He's not been terrible at all. I mean, yeah, George Russell has had a good debut season. There is no doubt about that. But if you look at the actual comparison, Hamilton versus Russell, I don't see how you could really say that Russell has been better than Hamilton this season. I mean, when was the last time Russell, in a fair fight, beat Lewis Hamilton in the same race, where they both finished the race and there wasn't like a massive factor towards, Russell finishing ahead? And I know people will say, well, Monza, because Russell finished 3rd, Hamilton 5th, but Hamilton started at the back, so I think that's, not really that meaningful, that result. And he did, Lewis, out-qualify Russell on the Saturday. I mean, you'd have to go back to the Dutch Grand Prix, but Hamilton was screwed over with the strategy. I mean, yes, Spa, Hamilton knocked himself out of that race, but, factually, he didn't finish that race. And then before then, you'd have to go back to the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where Russell finished 3rd, Hamilton finished in 4th. Like I said, George Russell has had a good season. There is no doubt about it, but to sit here and claim that Lewis Hamilton has been terrible, shocking, would be so stupid if I said that, to be honest. So, yeah, I'm definitely not going to say that. I think Lewis Hamilton, has he been at his best this season? No, he definitely has not, but he's still been great. His run that he went on from Canada to the end of the first half of the season, just before the summer break, I think from Canada to Hungary, he was absolutely brilliant during that period. Driving as well as he ever has, to be honest. So, yeah, I think Lewis has been... I think he's done well this season, but, yeah, could he do better? Absolutely, but I don't think he's been terrible or poor, and I don't think it's like a, similar situation to when, Michael Schumacher was getting showed up by Nico Rosberg at Mercedes, 10 years ago. I just don't think it's similar in any way, to be honest. As Darth Lord Rose says, Chaz, a dream on, mate. Hamilton will never win a championship again. The hit was too hard, and 2021 he'll never overcome. We don't know that. Turbo says, Leclerc, I feel, was not outstanding under pressure, but maybe Mercedes would provide an environment that is that is less of a pressure cooker. I don't think Leclerc's the best under pressure. I would agree with that. He's not one of the absolute elite drivers under pressure. I think the absolute elite drivers under pressure would be Max, Lewis, Alonso, probably the top three. And, Leclerc, he's had a couple moments where he has cracked at very important moments, such as, of course, the French Grand Prix when he was leading at a very important moment. Obviously, that race in Turkey where he was second going into the third to last corner, and then he went wide and cost himself a podium. And there's been, I think, a couple other moments where he's, just got a bit too hot under the collar, has Leclerc. But I think, honestly, the environment he's in plays a lot into it. Because Ferrari, they may like to sit there and pretend like everything is fine and that there's nothing really wrong at Ferrari and that, business is normal. But Ferrari, in reality, they've got a lot of people at that team that are also, not also, but they are terrible under pressure and probably, in reality, panic a lot when they actually, have to perform, whether it be in qualifying or a Grand Prix on a Sunday. So if you actually put Leclerc in a better environment, I think Leclerc probably would thrive a bit more. And to be honest, I was actually thinking about this a couple of days ago, about drivers and teams and the effect that drivers have on teams or on cars that they drive. Drivers definitely have an effect on the cars they drive and the results that they get themselves. I'm not going to say that it's 100% the car or anything like that, but in reality, at this point where Formula One is, and it's been this way for quite a while, 75% of the results that a driver gets is down to the team/car. The driver makes up the rest, which of course would be 25%. The driver has to, fulfill their end of the bargain, but at the end of the day, no matter how great of a driver you have, if you don't have a good enough car, obviously, you're not going to be able to win races and win a world championship. Just look at Fernando Alonso. He's had a great season, and he hasn't been on the podium this season, despite driving incredibly, because the Alpine car just isn't quick enough at all to be in that position, to be fighting for podiums or race wins. But, if you put Lewis Hamilton or Max Verstappen in the Ferrari team, maybe in certain specific years you could argue the result would be different, but I'm not sure most of the time the results would be different. I'm not sure. Looking at the last two times Ferrari actually contended for the World Championship, for example, in 2017 and 2018, there was a discussion at the time that, if you put Lewis Hamilton in the Ferrari, then the results would be different. In 2018, I think definitely you could have that argument and could definitely be correct in saying that. But for 2017, Vettel made a couple very costly errors, but I'm not sure that Hamilton would have actually won the championship in 2017 anyway, because of the way Ferrari fell off towards the end of that season. So, I think what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, with a team like Ferrari, is because of the way they are and the way they have been for a 10, 15 year period, I don't think there's any driver you can put in that team, which I think is what I said earlier. I don't think there's any driver you could put in that team that would be getting anything dramatically better than what they're getting now. So I can't really blame Charles Leclerc really at all for his results at the end of the day. Yeah, he hasn't had always the best weekends, and has had the odd weekend where, he's behind his teammate, whoever his teammate is, and he's had the odd race where he's made critical errors, but let's not pretend like every driver doesn't have that. I think if you put Leclerc in a Red Bull team or a Mercedes team, I think Leclerc definitely performs more like a Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton type driver. So, yeah, we'd have to see, to be honest. I mean, my hope from Charles Leclerc's point of view is that he does join Mercedes, because I do not want to see him at Ferrari for like the next 10 years, because I just know if you were to, come back, travel back from the future and tell me that, Leclerc will be at Ferrari until like 2031 or something, I would be so disappointed, because I just know that if he was to stay until 2031 of that team, or 2030, whatever you want to call it, that he wouldn't have any world championships or that much more to show than he has now. So, yeah, it really does matter in regards to a driver's results. It really just does matter the environment and the car that you give them, rather than what they actually do as a driver. Again, you do have to have some really good / all-time great drivers to win world championships and win lots of races, but even if you put the absolute best drivers of all time in really, poor environments, with cars that aren't performing as well as they should, then you're not really going to get much more out of those particular drivers than you would get currently out of maybe lesser drivers, if you know what I mean. Sorry if I rambled a bit too much there, but I think you guys understand what I mean. That basically, to win in F1, it's mostly about the team and driver, or the team and the car, the quality of the car. The driver, makes up, the rest, say 25, maybe you could argue 30% of the total, not effort, but the total contribution, really, towards race wins, championships, etc. Anyway, let's get on to some other comments here, because there's plenty more to get through, and we've only got 27 minutes until practice 2, so not long now, guys, until second practice. Turbo asked, do we think Mercedes is changing their car philosophy for next year and dump the zero side pod idea? Surely they will. I mean, they have talked about them, maybe keeping it, maybe working on it a bit more to see if they can get more out of it. But if they want to be title contenders next year, I think they've got to dump it and go the route of Ferrari or Red Bull. I'd say more so Red Bull, because I think their whole side pod design is probably the best that's out there in F1. But yeah, if they turn up with a zero side pod again next year, I would be very disappointed, to be honest, because when you look at that concept and the results they've had this season, yeah, they've had the occasional race where they've been very competitive, but it just never, no matter how many upgrades they put on it and how hard they've worked, it just hasn't really got to the point where it's good enough for them. So I just think they need to stick it and, go for something that actually works. Let's find some other comments here in the chat. Josiah says, hey Rooks, and yes, you're spot on, Merc. Can't see the flaw in this concept. Either they know something we don't, or they are officially Ferrari levels of stupid. To be honest, if they are wanting to stick with it, then that tells me that maybe back at the factory, when going through the data, they think there's a lot more potential or time there to be found that they can't find, say, over the winter. So, yeah, we'll have to see what happens with it. Obviously, we won't know until pre-season testing at the end of February next year in regards to what their side pod design is. Right, let's find some other comments here in the chat if I can. Josiah also says, I mean, when their technical director is saying they understand what they did wrong and have been working throughout the season to fix it for next year, that really opened my eyes. Darth Lord Raven says, Danny Rick likes NASCAR. Hate to see him go. That is worse drivers, as there are worse drivers than him. Turbo says, I don't ever see Ricciardo coming back. Seems like a heck of a gamble on his part to come back in 2024. He did actually say, I think yesterday did Ricciardo, that he wants to come back in 2024 and be higher up the grid than he's been this season, which is very ambitious because McLaren, they're 5th in the championship, and at times this season they've been running quite high in the midfield, 7th, 8th, 9th. So, yeah, it's quite ambitious, that aim from Ricciardo, but credit to him for having that ambition. It's it got him where he is now in F1 with how many race wins he's had and the great career he has had. And there's no doubt he's had a great career for the cars he's driven and the teams he's been a part of. But yeah, I think Ricciardo's done. I don't think we'll see Ricciardo on the grid again. I think the only place we could see Ricciardo possibly in 2024 or even after 2024 is either Sauber, when Audi finally come on board, say for 2026. Maybe they would go for a Ricciardo because he's experienced. Depends really on the driver market at the time, though, in regards to that. But also Haas F1, if them sticking Haas with Schumacher or going with Hülkenberg for next year, if that doesn't work out next year, then maybe Ricciardo could get in there. Other than that, though, I don't really see where he can go, which would be satisfactory for him. He's not going to be going to Red Bull. That's not going to happen. I think Perez, like I said in that clip, I think Perez will stay at Red Bull for the next 3-4 years, really. He's a long-term driver for that team, no doubt about it. Sergio Perez. Ferrari, I don't think they're going to have him. Mercedes, I'd be very surprised if they have him. I mean, I was actually saying in that clip, if Lewis Hamilton does retire at the end of next year, they will need kind of like an interim driver, but before they go and get a Leclerc or a Norris to be a long-term replacement for Lewis Hamilton. So if Hamilton was to retire at the end of next year, maybe in 2024 Mercedes would decide to go for Ricciardo as an interim 1 or 2 year choice before they go and get a better driver. We'll have to see. But yeah, chances are that he's done in F1, which is a shame. But I will never say that he's not had that, great of a career, or his career has turned out to be disappointing or anything like that, or maybe he didn't achieve as much as he could have. I think if you look at Ricciardo's career, yes, his time at McLaren did not go anywhere near as well as it should have, and it was very disappointing. But if you look at the rest of his career, I think Ricciardo did the best he could with what he was given in his career. He was, unfortunately for him, racing for Red Bull at a time where they were unable to compete for world championships. His 2014 and 2016 seasons were brilliant, but again, the Red Bull just wasn't quick enough to fight for a championship. When, if he had a car quick enough, I reckon he could have actually probably won a championship in that period. And then, for Renault, I thought maybe not in his first year, but definitely in his second year, got everything he could out of that car and did the absolute best job possible at almost every single Grand Prix. And outside of Hamilton and Verstappen, I thought was the best driver that season. But yeah, again, his time at McLaren didn't go too well, but he's had a great career. There's no doubt about that. I think what I'm going to do now is go to some of the latest comments I can see in the chat, because we've only got about 20 minutes to go now. until practice 2 gets underway. So let me read out what you guys are currently saying in the chat. Omen says Lewis Hamilton lives a very expensive lifestyle and his jewellery alone can feed an African village for decades. No other thing can pay him as F1 does, so he's not going anywhere anytime soon. Josiah says people seem to forget that at times he was the 3rd best driver on the grid. Yeah, if you're talking about Ricciardo, yeah. I think people do forget just how great he was. Again, only 2 years ago, people were talking about Ricciardo as still possibly, if he was in the right car, a world championship contender. Because 2 years ago for Renault, he was very, very good. But since then, it's been tough. Even though, obviously, he won the Italian Grand Prix last year. Still, an amazing drive he put in that weekend to get that. Let me see if I can find some other comments here in the chat. Josiah says Leclerc isn't completely blameless, but yeah, it's not his fault. You're only as strong as your weakest link, and that weakest link is Ferrari as a whole. And Josiah also says Ferrari are stuck in the mid-2000s. F1 has evolved and they haven't evolved with it. The potential is only there if it works. Otherwise, bits useless. I wouldn't say they're stuck in the mid-2000s. I just think they went away from what worked. Because what they did in the 90s was they went out and got the best available people they could find for their best, most important positions, and that's what led to them becoming world champions. You know, Jean Todt, a very successful person outside of F1 as a team boss in, I think, for Peugeot for rallying and also sports car racing. Ross Brawn already had great success, I think, with Williams and Benetton. So did Rory Byrne, and obviously they went and got the best driver at the time, Michael Schumacher. When Michael Schumacher left, Ferrari started obviously going away from that, and it became more of a it became more, in terms of their process, became more about homegrown talent rather than just going out and getting the best people. And that's what's led to where they are now. They don't have that same hunger for victory, I don't think. Or at least the current regime at Ferrari. They just don't have that same hunger that was at Ferrari 30 years ago to, you know, properly be a championship team again. And it's sad, but that's the way it is, unfortunately. And I will say with Ferrari, I think they will have still chances in the next few years to become world champions. I don't think they're going to like fall away into the midfield and just, you know, wither away. But that point in time, if they don't start properly, you know, reshuffling this team and changing the way they do things and rebuilding this team, then they will head the same way McLaren did, and maybe not Williams did, but definitely the same way McLaren did, where years of stagnation and missed opportunities eventually led to them losing talent, you know, certain drivers, team personnel, and eventually McLaren became a midfield team, and they still are. If Ferrari don't, you know, they don't properly have a proper rebuild that gets them back to where they should be, then that possibility becomes will eventually become a reality for them. And I know people may say, well, Ferrari are too big to become a midfield team. I'm not so sure about that anymore. With the cost cap we've got now, which, you know, as the years go on, it will close the field up. There's no doubt about it. It will close the field up. The reason it hasn't yet is because It just hasn't been around long enough, and we had a massive regulation change after the first year of the cost cap. So, yeah, the cost cap hasn't really been allowed to make a difference yet, but in a couple years, it will start to make a difference. There's no doubt about it. But, you know, with that, limiting their ability to outspend everyone by like $500 million, and them still in the position they're in currently, I think it's definitely possible. I don't think with Ferrari you can look at them and say it's impossible that they could become like a team stuck in the midfield. I mean, if you go back 15, 20 years ago and said to someone about the possibility about McLaren being a permanent team in that midfield scrap, people would laugh at you. And they would say probably that McLaren, they're way too big for that and that's never going to happen. But look where they, or look how bad they got and where they went to. So it's definitely possible. But, and yeah, Turbo saying on the chat, we forget how bad Ferrari were. In the early to mid-90s, Ferrari, I mean, maybe not in the mid-90s, but in the early 90s, Ferrari were pretty much like an upper midfield team. They weren't really a front-running team at all. Say, in 91, 92, 93. And yeah, 2020, obviously, a couple years ago, where they were absolutely awful. Wasn't that long ago, obviously. So, yeah, it's definitely a possibility. But anyway, we're only 13 minutes away from practice 2 beginning. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link out for the stream a couple more times. And then we will, or I'll read a couple more comments out in the chat. And then we'll get into the session itself. Still hot and sunny. Not a cloud to be seen in the distance. Which is good to see. Right. So, let me just post it out on Twitter quickly, the link to the stream, and then we'll get into some more comments, and then eventually the session itself. So just bear with me for a couple moments, guys, and I'll try and see if there's any news I can bring you quite quickly. I've just seen Andrew Benson, who's a journalist in the F1 world, obviously. Apparently, Formula One is working on a new women's racing category. If you didn't know, by the way, the W Series was going to race, I think, this weekend and in Mexico, but their season has been brought to a halt because of financial problems. So, yeah, that's a shame for them. But let me just quickly do some of these hashtags before we get into the session. I'll just do that one. There you go. And post the link back out. So, yeah. Let me just quickly look at this article. Yeah, F1 won't provide further details, but the plan apparently is to launch a new series next year, so we'll see what happens with that. Sid or CID says, every time you say it's hot, I have to chuckle. I'm from Texas and it's definitely nice and cool right now. Well, that's because you're used to it. I'm from the UK. Anything above 20 degrees Celsius is boiling hot to us. So do bear with us. I mean, if I lived in, obviously, hotter climates for long enough, it would, you know, I'd get used to it. But, yeah. British people, we're never going to be used to hot weather. Even though the summer we had was, disgusting. It was absolutely disgusting. Constant sweating. We had about 3, not just like proper heat waves, like properly bad heat waves where you could barely breathe. The air was that hot, I guess you could say. Yeah, it was just so bad. But like I said, if I was used to it, it wouldn't be that bad for me. As looking at the Sky F1 coverage, and they're not really dressed like it's summer, so obviously they're a bit used to it at this point. Thankfully, it's not. We haven't got any hurricanes passing through like we did in 2015. I think 2018 as well. We had really bad weather that weekend. I think for the Friday practice day, but we haven't had any of that. I think since that weekend 4 years ago. But yeah, they're just showing at the minute highlights of practice 1, which of course took place about 2 or 3 hours ago. Silverback Orangutan says Brits would never make it in Cincinnati, so humid. Well, I'm a big tennis fan, and I watched obviously the Cincinnati event they did earlier in the year in what was it? It's mid-August, and they were saying it's normally a very humid event for the time of year. And yeah, looking at what the players were like during it, and I've also watched, tennis matches from there before. Yeah, it's pretty bad by the looks of it. To be honest, if I was to move to the US, I think most of the US would be too hot for me, considering where I live in the UK and how hot it gets here. I think the best places for me to live would probably be somewhere like, it'd have to be somewhere where it was, like, in the summer, hot, but fresh or fresher, rather than extreme heat and extreme humidity. By the way, thanks to Darth Lord Raven for the super chat of €1, I think that is. Didn't put a message, but thanks for that. Really appreciate it. Silverback says usually you'll see a few players puke on court from heat alone. Yeah, I know in especially August, I know the humidity in America is pretty bad. Also, I think Washington, where the White House is, that part of the US. I watched tennis there from earlier this year, and I think that was like late July, start of August, and the humidity there was brutally bad. And yeah, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be able to cope with it. I'm not sure about that, Silverback. You just posted that comment in the chat. I'm not going to read it out, but I'm not too sure about that. Let's see if I can find some other comments quick. I don't think so. Turbo asks, what went wrong for Ricciardo? Is it the McLaren's really garbage? I think with Ricciardo, I think it was probably the first year. It was probably just the car not being really, or not really suiting him as much as Norris, because obviously Norris had been there a couple years, and the car probably would have been more set up in Norris's favour rather than Ricciardo. So Ricciardo had to, to learn, what the car was like, really. And Lando didn't have a really, a big learning curve compared to Daniel. But for this year, I think Daniel just struggling with one thing I have seen the drivers at McLaren say quite often, especially Lando Norris, is that this 2022 McLaren car, and thankfully it's on the screen at the same time, it's a good car, but it's very hard to set up, because Lando was saying, I think a few days ago, that sometimes with this car there'll be too much understeer in it, and then when he tries to put some front wing on, then suddenly oversteer will, develop. So it's, I think, very hard with this car to get like a very good setup, and the setup window is not very wide. And even Lando has said that he struggled with it this season. So I think that's played a big factor. Also, though, because Ricciardo's not been allowed to travel home really until this year, I think that affected him a lot last year. which he talked about. So, yeah, that's a shame. Silverback Orangutan says Daniel fell apart mentally after he rear-ended Max. That ruined him mentally. Yeah, I'm not sure about that, actually, because he did win the Monaco Grand Prix after that. I think it was 2 races after that he won in Monaco. I think I don't think his problems began with that, because we saw in his second year at Renault just how great he was. I think it was just I just think, again, the car, in terms of its setup, just wasn't what he liked, and it wasn't more so in his direction. And obviously, with him, having a equal driver alongside him, he couldn't not gamble, but he couldn't bet on the team trying to set the car up more in his direction, like he could maybe at Renault when he had only, Hülkenberg and then Ocon as his teammates. So yeah, it definitely played a factor, but that's what happened. Turbo says, you think it's been helpful to Norris that he has been in a McLaren his whole career? Had been helpful. Has being in a McLaren for so long been helpful to Norris? Yes, but not massively. I mean, I think one thing that's been massively helpful to Norris is McLaren getting a lot better since he joined the team in 2019. Because in the couple years before, McLaren were a complete fucking joke. So if McLaren had not got their act together, then Lando would have had a pretty rough career so far. But thankfully for him, McLaren started getting their act together in just the right time. But guys, I think for now, yeah, we'll finish with your comments, because we are about to get into practice 2, which is starting in a couple minutes time. Just to update you guys about the weather, there's a 16.5 kilometer an hour wind, a 29 degrees Celsius air temperature, 37 degrees Celsius track temperature. So it's actually a tad warmer than it was in practice 1, but pretty much the same temperatures. And yeah, I'm interested to see what we get in this session. And as they're just in the helicopter showing the people on the top of the very tower there, towards, I think, was it turn 18, 19? That big tower that is there, I would be absolutely terrified to stand on the top of that. And if I ever go to the US Grand Prix, I am never going near that. I am terrified of that. Yeah, I mean, I don't like being high up, period, but that terrifies me, genuinely. There's still quite a few people at the track, which is good to see. And I think at this point, I'll hide all this stuff and get my graphics up for you guys. Unfortunately, it'll be the same pictures as earlier, because I wasn't able to find any current pictures. But don't worry, for tomorrow, I will be able to. And let me just quickly get up the drivers on the left-hand side, and obviously now all of the normal drivers, because all of the reserve drivers from practice 1 obviously won't be competing for the rest of the weekend. And one difference, if you guys didn't know, for this practice 2 session is that instead of being an hour long, like almost all practice sessions, this session will be an hour and a half, because Pirelli want an extra half an hour to do some tyre testing for 2023. So that's why this session is a half an hour longer than normal. as Lewis Hamilton just being strapped into his car, having the hands device put in. And looks as though Daniel Ricciardo, who of course had his car taken over in practice 1 by a driver, I'm not going to say his name because I will get his name wrong for the millionth time, and I don't really want to say his name anymore because I hate having to wonder if I've said it correctly. But Ricciardo is about to come out on track on medium compound tyres by the looks of it. And he comes out of the garage, and I think the session has started, but they just haven't shown the timer on screen yet. So I will get the timing synced up on my screen as soon as I can, probably at the 1 hour 29 minute mark. As looks as though we've got a Red Bull coming out of Max Verstappen, I think that is. And that big-ass American flag is still at turn 1. And it is absolutely massive, that flag. Biggest flag I've ever seen. I don't know if it's because it's so much closer than other flags you see on TV, but it looks absolutely massive on the TV broadcast. As the cars come out on track, and yeah, in about 10 seconds, I'll sync up the timer on screen. As I think both Red Bulls are on track now. And 3, 2, 1. There you go. So we've got an hour and 29 minutes to go in practice 2. And yeah, let's see what early times we get on the board here. Hard to know exactly what the most Rook saying chat is because it's Texas Chaz. Yeah, they are proud of the flag in that part of the world. There's no doubt about that. In terms of lap times, it's a bit difficult to know exactly what the, some real quick lap time should look like. Max Verstappen's pole position last year was a 1:32.9. So, well, I guess in this session, as Brad Pitt is just walking, I think, to the pit wall. And he's probably going to wave to the fans or something. What do you call it? Yeah, with these cars, considering the difference in lap time between these cars and, the 2021 cars, they should probably, at their quickest, be lapping in qualifying, probably, 1:33. So I think in this session, considering they won't be running, at their absolute quickest, we're probably looking at a mid to low 1:34 for the quickest lap times in this session, I reckon. And if you're wondering, by the way, why Brad Pitt's at the Grand Prix, it's not just because he's a celebrity and he wants to have a look at F1. It's because he's starring in an F1 film, I think, coming out in a couple years, that Lewis Hamilton is producing. And I think the story of the film, or the premise, I guess you could call it, is that Brad Pitt will be playing a driver coming out of retirement to compete against the new, fresh, hot young talent, and I guess win the World Championship or something, which is basically the same storyline of Michael Schumacher when he returned to F1, except obviously Michael didn't win a championship or anything. So, yeah, it's a similar storyline to that, actually. But we'll see how that goes. To be honest, if Brad Pitt is starring in it, I don't think it'll be terrible. I know there was a motor racing film with Sylvester Stallone 20 years ago that was terrible, but given how good Brad Pitt is, and he doesn't, engage in movie projects that are, shit, I'd say it's probably going to be at least a decent film. As Charles Leclerc is on a flying lap on the soft compound tyres, just coming to the mid-sector point. Don't know if they are the test tyres. I don't think they are. I think they're just the normal soft tyres for this weekend. I will say, though, if that film with Brad Pitt, yeah, F1 film, if it's as good as Ford versus Ferrari, that film that came out a couple of years ago with Christian Bale and Matt Damon, then it'll be a hit. There's no doubt about it. As Leclerc coming to the end of his lap, and he's going to go quickest, I think, for Ferrari with his first lap of the weekend. And he does a 1:38.8, which is pretty slow, but it is the quickest time we've had so far. With Ricciardo on the mediums in P2. And here's a replay of Leclerc through turn 3 and 4, I think. Just him bumping away and sparks flying as he goes through that brilliant first sector. One of the best sectors of any track on the calendar, without doubt, as Sebastian Vettel is on a lap on the Pirelli test tyre. And, right, let me just put some... not put some times on the board, but let me just quickly do the running order because we've got quite a few times. Leclerc quickest at the minute from Ricciardo second. Bottas is third with Gasly in fourth. Hamilton fifth. And then Lando Norris is sixth. Well, not anymore because it's now Yuki Tsunoda in sixth with Norris in seventh. Ocon is in eighth. Well, not anymore because Max Verstappen has gone only fifth. But yeah, they're not doing really that quicker lap times so far as Carlos Sainz is on a flying lap on the Pirelli test tyre. And the rest of the top 10, yes, Norris 8th, Ocon 9th, and then you've got Zhou in 10th. With Perez 11th. Not anymore. Perez is now in second. And we've got Mario Andretti in the Sky F1 com box. I think, as Carlos Sainz, by the way, goes quickest, a tenth of a second quicker than Charles Leclerc in the other Ferrari. I think the commentary team for this practice session on Sky F1, I think it's Rachel Brooks and Danica Patrick and Mario Andretti, which is a pretty good lineup there, if that is what it is. Of course, if you guys didn't see, it was all over Twitter last week, I think earlier this week. Mario Andretti, at 82 years old, drove a 2013 McLaren at Laguna Seca. Very impressive at that age, and he didn't just tour around in it, he actually gave it a decent go, so full credit to the guy. As Valtteri Bottas goes third, Hamilton, his old teammate, is in fourth now with Ricciardo fifth, and then Max Verstappen 6th, Perez 7th, Gasly 8th, Norris 9th, and Tsunoda 10th. And then it is Russell in 11th place in the Mercedes, with Zhou in 12th. As now they're showing the drone footage above Magnussen going through turn 11. It's I mean, it's good footage, but it is a bit unnerving with that drone there that they're showing on the TV broadcast. But yes, Russell 11th, Zhou 12th, Ocon 13th, Albon 14th. Russell has just gone on 9th. And then Alonso 15th, and then Vettel, Latifi, Magnussen, Schumacher, Stroll. Stroll hasn't left the pit lane yet, which is interesting because as Charles Leclerc, by the way, is back to the top of the timesheets, 1.1 seconds quicker than teammate Sainz. But Lance Stroll in first practice was 4th. Very impressive from the Canadian. As Magnussen goes 14th on the Pirelli test tyre. What they're probably going to do here, guys, is a lot of the teams is just get that tyre out of the way and get that, you know, whatever 10, 15 laps on that tyre out of the way. And then we'll probably get some proper serious running then on the, you know, soft tyres with proper low fuel to see just how quick certain cars are. Let me just quickly adjust my seating position now because my back does hurt quite a bit. And then I'll be back with you guys in a sec. And that feels a lot better than it did a moment ago, as a lot of cars now come back into the pits. Mick Schumacher has gone up to 10th. And yeah, the rest of the order, as you can see on your screen, is correct, except for Perez ahead of Verstappen. But yeah, current top 10, 10 minutes into the session, Leclerc, Sainz, Bottas, Hamilton, Ricciardo, Perez, Verstappen, Gasly, Russell, Schumacher. As Lando Norris on the Pirelli test tyre comes back into the pits. Maybe they'll just dump them straight away. As here's Hamilton on the back straight. I think just testing if his DRS is working by opening and closing it about 5 times. And we're now looking at Valtteri Bottas in 3rd, who is on the medium compound tyres. In the Alfa Romeo car that, I've got to say, in this type of sunlight, does look very, very beautiful. It's not been a very quick car, though, in the last few months, but still in a good position in the championship for now, as Bottas goes quicker, but stays in 3rd. But yeah, at the minute, we've not really had any representative times set by the drivers. They're probably, I would say, about 4 seconds away from the best times we're going to see, I think, later in this session. Just looking at Twitter to see if there's any news I can bring you guys, because at the minute, unfortunately, almost everyone is in the pits. And no, can't see anything. As we look at Charles Leclerc on an outlap on medium tyres. I believe, yep, medium tyres. Obviously, Robert Schwartzman drove his car in first practice. Thankfully, didn't put it in the wall. And now Leclerc takes over. There are reports that Leclerc will have to take an engine penalty of some sort this weekend. We're hearing either a 5-place penalty for a new ICE. We've even got reports at this point that he might be starting from the very back of the field this weekend for a completely new power unit. What has become clear, though, from the reports is that Leclerc will be taking a engine penalty of some sort either this weekend or next weekend. So if you're a Ferrari fan, I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. It's Ferrari. What did you expect? And so I've got to say, that grandstand they've set up, I think a new one there at the real heart of the first sector is a really nice one by the track organisers. As Leclerc does a purple first sector 0.3 of a second quicker than his personal best. And he's just coming onto the back straight now. And he should go a lot quicker than his personal best from a few laps ago. As he passes a slow horse car. Down the back straight. And he's half a second up on his personal best. So yeah, Leclerc will probably go another, I don't know, 7 or 8 tenths quicker than his previous best. Keeping it nice and smooth on this lap is Charles. And the Ferrari car, I've got to say, looks pretty good around this track as I thought it would. So it will be a shame if he does have to take a penalty, because I think if he didn't have to take a penalty, I think Leclerc would be in very good shape here for at least pole position, because Ferrari look pretty good with this car. It looks like it's very nicely settled around this track, and he does go even quicker, 8 tenths of a second quicker than his personal best. And his best lap now is a 136.8. So, yeah, another couple seconds at least, I reckon, until we get into some proper times in this session. I mean, we have to remember he did do that on the medium compound tyre. Did Leclerc. Obviously, the soft tyre worth a lot more in terms of lap time around a track like this. As we now look at an Aston Martin of Sebastian Vettel, is it? Yeah, it is. And they correctly point out, as he's on the, I think, Pirelli test tyre, and he is, that he made his Grand Prix debut in America at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 2007 and got a great result, 8th place for BMW. Very impressive, given that at the time, Formula One, outside of the top 2 teams at the time, McLaren and Ferrari, was pretty competitive. I mean, BMW did have mostly that season the 3rd quickest car, but it was still pretty competitive in that upper midfield part of the field. And yet to finish 8th on his debut was brilliant, and pretty much what secured him getting into the Toro Rosso mid-season in 2007, and the rest, as we know, is history, as he's only 4 races away from his F1 career coming to a close after an amazing weekend he had in Japan, where he qualified, was it 9th? I think he qualified. I can't remember exactly where he qualified, 9th or 10th, and then he ended up 6th in the race. One of his best drives of the last few years, I've got to say, that one. 2 weeks ago at Suzuka, and the one in Singapore was pretty great as well. As Vettel on another flying lap, but he's not improved his first sector. And I've just realised that Daniel Ricciardo is actually 4th. So, sorry about that. But yeah, Ricciardo in P4. Sergio Perez, I can see, is on an outlap. And so is Pierre Gasly. As Alex Albon in 16th improves his best time, but stays in 16th. But he's pretty slow with the lap time he's done so far. As Vettel, yeah, he's not really going quickly at all. He looks like he's got quite a bit of fuel on board. Does Sebastian. And yeah, 6.3 seconds off the pace with that particular lap was Seb. As looks as though we're about to get Lance Stroll onto circuit. Let me just quickly look to see. What the actual issue was there. I just saw though Rob in chat was asking, how are the bumps? I mean, there are definitely some bumps. Into turn 1 it is still prevalent, but it's not as bad as I thought it would be. They've made it a lot better, which is good to see. No, nothing from Aston Martin. So maybe just a slight issue. And we're now looking at Lando Norris, who is P12 on a improved lap on the Pirelli test tyre. I mean, given this session's an extra half an hour long, I think we're probably going to get more, representative running probably in about 10 to 15 minutes from now. most likely, as Alex Albon, I think, improves his lap time again, but still stays in 16th. There's Lando Norris about to cross the line, but we don't get to see where he goes because Martin Brundle is trackside, and we know what that means on the Sky broadcast. They cut away from everything just to show what he is doing, and he's got a very good angle. He stood on the exit of turn 1, and he's got a pretty good view, and he's actually pretty close to the cars. He's almost in front of the barriers, is Martin. And yeah, the entry to turn 1 is still quite bumpy, but it's not as bad as it was last year or in 2019 when it was absolutely horrendous. And caused in 2019 Sebastian Vettel's rear right or rear left suspension failure? I think it was rear right suspension failure. But yeah, it's a popular part of the track, obviously. Many of the fans congregate at that part of the circuit, and it's a great place, obviously, to watch the start of the race, and plenty of overtaking does go on into turn 1. It's the second best overtaking place on the track. And I think the thing I love about turn 1 is you can take different lines. You don't have to take the same line, and there's a lot of different type of overtakes you can do through turn 1. So yeah, it's a great corner, and quite unique as well, because it's obviously an uphill turn 1, when if you look at the tracks we have on the calendar, normally it's downhill to turn 1, like, you know, Catalonia, or the circuit at Catalonia, Hungary. I mean, Silverstone, I think it's flat until turn 1. I think Monza is flat. I think Melbourne, I think it's downhill to turn 1. Pretty sure it is. Yeah, it is flat to turn 1. Well, not flat, it's downhill, sorry, to turn 1. So, yeah, an uphill turn 1 is quite a unique thing. I don't think there's... Is there any other uphill turn 1s on the calendar? If there is, I must be... Oh, no, Austria. Sorry. Austria, that's one. The Red Bull Ring. Yeah, there's not that many on the calendar. Normally, like I said, turn 1, compared to where they start from on the grid, tends to be downhill or flat. As we're looking at Daniel Ricciardo on a flying lap on the soft compound tyre. Lando Norris has improved up to P5. And Zhou Guan Yu, I've just seen, has gone up to 12th in the Alfa Romeo, pushing Magnussen and Schumacher down to 13th and 14th. We've got Tsunoda up to P10 now, and Perez is now in 9th for some reason. Obviously, when they cut away to Martin Brundle, some things happened. But yeah, Verstappen 6th, Hamilton 7th, and then Gasly, Perez, Tsunoda completing the top 10. Here comes Ricciardo, currently 4th. Now goes 2nd, 0.8 of a second slower than Leclerc. Spa is uphill. Turn 1. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I did actually think of Spa, but I wasn't sure if it was uphill, so I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, it is. Obviously, Interlagos is downhill from the starting grid. Well, it's weird, Interlagos. It's uphill initially and then goes downhill from the starting grid. Because on the starting grid at Interlagos, you're actually rolling backwards. And you go uphill briefly and then you go downhill into turn 1, 2, and 3, you know, through the Senna S. So, yeah, it's a bit of a weird section, but, you know, I think we all love that track and especially that part of the track. Trying to think if there's any other uphill turn ones. Is the even though it's not on the calendar anymore, would the Sepang circuit in Malaysia be an uphill turn one? Maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, I know obviously when they go into turn 2, obviously it goes downhill. But yeah. The point being, and by the way, Turbo, yes, it is a Herman Tilke circuit, I'm pretty sure. Let me just check that. Make sure I am correct. But the reason I mention this is because, yeah, it is unusual that you get an uphill run to turn 1. Don't know why it's normally downhill. I think maybe that's just the way they've always built tracks, and that's the way it's always been. Oh no, I've accidentally searched for the wrong track. I searched Circuit de Catalunya. Circuit of the Americas. By the way, Sky F1 have gone to an ad break, so you're not missing anything. And yeah, Herman Tilke and also a company, Miro Rivera Architects. And yeah, what a circuit it has been. Turbo asks, is Paul di Resta going to be on this weekend? Hopefully not. Yeah, hopefully not, because he's, yeah. He's a terrible pundit. I mean, in terms of a person, obviously, he's absolutely fine from what I've seen, but in terms of his punditry, I just think he is just terrible, really. And I think, from Sky F1's point of view, if you're going to have pundits, well, you have to have pundits, but the ones you should have, really, at this point, is Brundle, Rosberg, Jenson Button, Anthony Davidson, Karun Chandhok, and then occasionally Damon Hill. But other than that, I don't think there's any other people out there that, you know, they should absolutely be getting on their coverage, to be honest. But yeah, Paul di Resta, I wouldn't say here at Chazza HD we are big fans of Paul. Certainly not my co-commentator most Grand Prix, Niblo. But yeah, I just seen something quite funny. This must have just happened, and they've actually cut back from the ad break now. Hamilton blocking Alonso a bit, and Alonso has said on radio, Hamilton has no mirrors today. That's great. As here's a replay of Norris into the entry to the pit lane, almost losing the rear end, almost smacking the wall. That would have been a very messy return to the pits. Right. Says, di Resta isn't on this weekend. We decided he wasn't a high enough quality replacement for Nib. Yeah. Oh, God. We're now looking at George Russell. As on the F1 broadcast, they're showing a graphic showing the fight between him and Sainz for 4th in the championship, which I'm sure nobody cares about. Because in the end, it doesn't really matter. But Russell is leading that fight by 5 points. And I think Russell will probably win that battle. Just. As, interestingly, Toto Wolff is talking to the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, in the Mercedes garage right now. I wonder what they're talking about. As Sainz saying Tokyo Drift on the radio, and we saw a quick glimmer of him fully having to correct the car, I think through turn 15 or 16, I think it was. As Magnussen on the Pirelli test tyre is, I think, about to go a lot faster than his previous best, as Lance Stroll is up to 15th now in the Aston Martin. Valtteri Bottas goes second. Kevin Magnussen goes 11th for Haas, but it is currently Leclerc, Bottas, Ricciardo, Sainz, and then Mick Schumacher is 5th for the Haas team, with Norris 6th, Verstappen 7th, Hamilton 8th, Gasly 9th, and Perez in 10th. And then Magnussen in 11th, Tsunoda 12th, Russell 13th, Zhou 14th, and then Stroll, Ocon, Alonso, Albon, Vettel, Latifi. That is your order with an hour to go of practice 2. As, I don't know who that was, but they were understeering like a shopping trolley at turn 11. As Albon on the Pirelli test tyre as well, going for a flying lap. Not quite a flying lap. He's 2.5 seconds down on Leclerc for the first sector, but he's clearly looking at his car on some heavier fuel. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I'd say the next 15-20 minutes, hopefully we should get some quicker runs. Because normally, obviously, practice 2 is an hour long. And initially what they would do is a decently quick run to start with, then a proper fast run halfway through the session, say, with 30 minutes to go, and then for the final 30 minutes do some heavier fueled runs, which a lot of teams at the minute are doing, but it's hard to really say, as Magnussen's saying, something big is loose around my pedals. Well, obviously Sebastian Vettel had that trouble a couple years ago. Definitely a definitely a male problem, that. I'm sure though it actually isn't that though. As Albon completes that lap, and 8 seconds off the pace. But yeah, they're doing heavier fueled runs at the minute, a lot of the cars, but we can't really look at it and say, like, oh, what's their pace like? Because they're on tyres that are not relevant to this weekend. They're only relevant to next year. That's a replay there of Albon looking the inside front. And in regards to Williams, they are currently 18th and 20th, and that's where they'll probably be this weekend. So if you're a Williams fan, if there's any still around, as Leclerc almost oversteering off the track at turn 7, I think that was. Hanging on, yeah. Williams are going to be at the very back this weekend. No chance of a heroic performance. As Norris is on an outlap for McLaren, currently up in 6th. Don't know what tyre he's on, though. The best... The only tyres... No, let me rephrase that again. The only times done on the actual tyres that are being used this weekend are the top 3. Leclerc, Bottas, Ricciardo. Leclerc did his best time on the medium, and then Bottas and Ricciardo on the soft. Everyone else has done their best lap time on the test tyre. Yeah, no representative running so far at the track, which is a shame, but we'll get there eventually. As Lando Norris is now doing a heavier fueled run on the Pirelli test tyre. Hello, by the way, to Ewok. Good to see you. Rook says, do we even know what compound the test tyre is meant to be equivalent to? Let me have a quick look on Pirelli's Twitter account, see if there's any information there. I'll also be able to find out the tyre compounds for this weekend. they did a tweet 30 minutes ago about, that they're doing some tyre testing in this session, but they didn't say anything about its relativity. Let me see. Right, so the 3 compounds this weekend are C4, C3, and C2. So yeah, I think most likely this weekend we're going to see a 2-stop race, and the reason that is because it is definitely possible to overtake here, so staying out on track and only doing a 1-stop strategy is not the most advantageous thing to do, but also the amount of load they put through the tyres here with the heat we're seeing for this weekend, which, yeah, it's not, as bad as it could be in Texas, but it is still quite hot, no matter how you view it objectively. It will cause the teams to have to do at least a 2-stop race. Let me see if we can read some of the comments in the chat quickly, because we've not really got anything happening in the session. So there's a Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton about to come out on the Pirelli test tyre. And yeah, this is going to take quite a while to liven up this session, unfortunately, guys. And nice message there at Haas in memory of Harvey Cook, a colleague, I think member of their team that yesterday sadly passed away at the age of 31, I believe. So rest in peace to him. And thoughts obviously go out to Haas F1 and F1 affected. And hopefully a points finish is in order this weekend for their home race and for Harvey as well. As Pierre Gasly, we're seeing on a longer fueled run. And I will try to see if there's any news on Twitter that I can bring you guys. Someone, I'm not going to say who, because I don't really trust them as a source, because they're, well, quite frankly, idiots to me anyway, is saying on Twitter that there are rumours that the FIA have downgraded Red Bull to a procedural breach and that their interpretation was correct. Incredible if true. I know what he's talking about, because it was a thing that came out, I think, yesterday within a Autosport article, which I will get into in my qualifying preview tomorrow, guys, at 6 PM UK time. So don't worry, guys. I will, reveal to you that information, and I will get into it tomorrow. As Hamilton is, I think, just warming up for his few lap run here, and yep, starts his run. But yeah, from the info I've seen, I think Red Bull, there's a chance they might be in the clear due to something that the FIA themselves have fucked up. So yeah, we'll get more into that tomorrow, though. Just trying to quickly see if there's any other news I can bring you guys. And yeah, can't see anything really at the minute, other than people laughing at Magnussen for having something loose between his legs, like Sebastian Vettel about 3 or 4 years ago in Brazil. As yeah, Hamilton continues on. It's not great, I've got to say, for the American fans, because there's quite a lot of fans at the track today, which is quite unusual, because normally Friday practice days aren't that well attended still, even though Formula One, its popularity has grown quite a bit. For them to, I mean, obviously that they're able to watch the cars and that, but they're not exactly, out there flying around causing anything exciting to happen. But then again, it is just practice. Turbo says, if the FIA backtracks, that's just going to piss off the fans more. Also, I hate the little air deflectors over the front tyres. Yeah, it's not a great look, but yeah, the team's obviously having to utilise that for aerodynamic gain. I think it also might be because of, and I'm not the most knowledgeable, I will admit, with, the technical side of F1, but I think it's also there to help, the airflow, help the cars follow better, follow behind another car. One thing I did see, though, is the FIA, I think, have agreed on the, the rules and regs for next season. And one thing we are going to get next season, obviously we're not going to have any possibility of flexi floors because they've already outlawed that from the Belgian Grand Prix. But there will be larger wing mirrors in 2023. Hopefully not too big. But, yeah, that's one thing I did see. So larger wing mirrors in 2023. As if it'll make a fucking difference. As Sergio Perez is on a lap now on the Pirelli test tyre. And he's got Daniel Ricciardo not too far behind him. And Perez, yeah, he's definitely on a heavier fueled run. And once someone actually breaks out some soft tyres, I'll let you guys know. But it's probably not going to be for another 10-15 minutes, unfortunately. Let me quickly look on Twitter again to see if there's any more news. Yeah. Further confirmation that F1 is working on an all-female feeder series to create a clearer path up the F2, F3 pyramid. Could be up and running as early as next year. Now, I've seen people online talk about, why can't they just buy out the W series thing? I mean, yeah, that's definitely something that, probably easier to do it that way, but I don't think it really is going to make a difference because you're probably going to have the same drivers in that female feeder series anyway. And it'll be more secure if F1 runs it themselves because it wasn't actually run by F1, I don't think. Or, financially properly supported or anything like that. So, yeah. And we'll see, whether it does offer a better, clearer path for women up the pyramid into F3, F2, and F1. But to be honest, looking at the W Series, which, to be honest, I don't think we'll see the W Series around probably ever again, because I think, with them not able to do any more races this season when they were supposed to be racing this weekend and I think next weekend in Mexico, with that not happening because they don't have the money, and Jamie Chadwick, I think, has been declared champion again for the third year in a row. I just don't think, I don't think we'll see it again. And to be honest, I don't think it'll be if F1 actually sets up their own female feeder series, which is basically just another version of the W series. I don't think it'll be the W series particularly missed. I mean, it wasn't terrible, the series, but it didn't really help women at all in getting them closer to being in Formula 1 or Formula 2, from what I saw. The only thing it did well, in my perspective, is it gave women a earlier start and gave them the opportunity to have more eyes on them at an earlier point in time than maybe they would have had if that series didn't exist. So, yeah, it gave, and I think I said this a few times, that, it gave them more of a chance to be seen and gave them a start-up in adult professional motorsport, but other than that, it hasn't actually furthered the cause to get a woman into Formula One. Which, to be honest, I don't think we're going to see a woman in F1. Probably in... I'm not even sure. Maybe not even in my lifetime, possibly, which would be a shame. But until a female comes along that's good enough, then, we'll see. But in regards to... so we're just looking at a replay. I think Lewis Hamilton just going through a couple corners and going wide at the penultimate corner. Oh, losing the rear end massively and almost having a big spin there. Hamilton. Yeah, lost. I think the reason he lost the rear end there was because the car got out on the exit curb and got straddled on it, which affected things. What was I going to say? In terms of there not being a female F1 driver, I don't think it's because of what maybe some people on social media would say, which is it's because it's a male-only sport and men don't want women in F1, period, and it's a sexist agenda or anything like that. I don't think it is that. I think if there was a female out there that clearly proved she was good enough for Formula One, they would be in F1 without a doubt, because sponsors would love to sponsor that person because it would be great for their brand and be obviously politically correct. And they would absolutely push for that person to get to that stage. And it would also be a great look for Formula One as well. So I don't think there's an agenda to keep women out of F1. I think it's just, there hasn't been a good enough driver, from what I've seen, to actually get to F1. But if one does come along eventually, then I have no doubt there'll be an F1 because of the, opportunity. As Martin Brundle is just stood at turn 15 talking about the cars obviously going past. Turbo says, "How get Chadwick a seat next year in Super Formula in Japan? Over 500 horsepower. Gasly came from Super Formula." Ewok says, "Agreed, has to be on merit, but women should have exactly the same opportunity to reach F1. I think they've got the opportunity. I mean, look at, was it Tatiana Calderon? She's been in F2 2 or 3 times. So, I don't think you can say that... Sorry, I was just looking at something on Twitter. I don't think there's, really, even for the last 20, 30 years, been less of an opportunity for women to be able to reach F1. There hasn't been a clear driver that, possibly could make it. Turbo says, that lady, Jamie Chadwick, she won multiple W Series championships? Yeah, I think she's a 3-time champion now. Give her a chance in an F2 or F3 car. That being said, a woman shouldn't just get into F1 because they're a woman. Has to be on merit. I mean, I agree, it has to be on merit, but what I'm saying is, if there is a female driver out there that looks even arguably good enough for Formula One, maybe not definitely good enough, but arguably good enough, then they'll be pushed to the moon. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, I want to see Jamie Chadwick in an F3 car or an F2 car, see what she does, but I don't think we're going to see that. I think, wasn't she trying to get a seat in F3 for this year and she couldn't get anything? Lack of sponsors, maybe? I'm not sure. I haven't really looked into the situation, to be honest, but yeah. As Max Verstappen is continuing his heavier fueled run on the test tyre, as we've got 41 minutes to go in Friday practice. Turbo says, problem is I don't think there has been or is currently a female driver that could make it in F1. Rook says, if you're fast enough, you're good enough. Win F2 with whatever's between your legs. The thing is, though, and we have to, admit this is absolutely the case. Unless you are hired by, a driver academy, you need a substantial financial package. Even if you get hired by a driver academy, you need, at times, a financial package. But, if you look at most of the drivers on the grid, they have some sort of financial package. What do you call it? Obviously, Perez with the Telemex sponsorship, and is it Carlos Slim is his backer, who I think is the wealthiest man in Mexico. I think he is. Lando Norris, his father is, I think, worth, I heard, a couple £100 million, is it? Zhou Guanyu was backed up by quite a lot of millions by the CCP in China. So, no matter your talent, in most cases, you need to have quite a good financial package. Obviously, with Lando Norris, by the way, the reason he got into F1 was not primarily because of his money, but it definitely helps. No matter how good you are, it helps if you've got finances to fall back on. But, yeah. In terms of getting a grid spot, it's not, as we know, always down to how good you are. It can be, a lot of the time, unfortunately, mostly down to what financial package do you bring to the table. As we've seen, with Pastor Maldonado, yeah, he won a Grand Prix, but let's be honest, most of the reason why he was hired by the teams he was hired by was because of the money he brought from Venezuela. I think even Esteban Gutierrez as well. Obviously, Mazepin. Even look at Robert Kubica with his return to Williams and F1. He needed that sponsorship from, was it Orlen? Was that the company that he needed the sponsorship from? The Polish company to get his seat. So, yeah. It's, that's unfortunately the way F1 works. Turbo says, yeah, I had no idea about Norris's financial package. Had totally forgot about it. Let me just quickly fact check myself. I was watching a Peter Brook video. You may know him. He's another F1 YouTuber. And I'm pretty sure he said in that video that his dad is worth quite a bit of money. Adam Norris. Net worth. Well, he has a stake in a Bristol-based something that is worth almost 200 million, and he is Adam Norris, Lando's father. He is the 610th richest man in Great Britain, yeah, with a net worth of £205 million, exactly. So, yeah, even for drivers like Lando, who, again, he was picked pretty much entirely because of how good he is, he still, had a financial package, quite a substantial one, to fall back on if it turned out he wasn't maybe as good as he's turned out to be, which could have helped him anyway. Even if, like I said, he didn't turn out to be as good as he has been. That's the name of the game, unfortunately. Don't hate the player, hate the game. As we're looking at Kevin Magnussen, who continues his run on the Pirelli test tyre, and we are still waiting for some flying fucking laps. Let's hope we get some soon, because we've got 36 minutes to go in practice 2, and we haven't really had any quick laps at all in this session. But you'd imagine, surely, that in the next, 10, 15 minutes, surely the teams are going to do some proper flying laps and not leave it to the very end of the session. Turbo says, I won't go quite as far as to say he's a paid driver, though, but he does bring a lot of money. Yeah. Again, he's definitely not a paid driver. There's no way you could call him that, but yeah. It's something that, let's say if anyone in the chat that's, a bit younger, in their, I don't know, teens or 20s, if you ever have a kid and you want them to be, a racing driver in the future, if you say get them interested in go-karting, and then they maybe take that interest and develop it into something that they want to, actually do when they grow up and become an actual racing driver. At the end of the day, if you actually want that kid to succeed, you're going to have some sort of money yourself to help that. That's unfortunately, like I said, the name of the game. As Sergio Perez starts a new lap on the Pirelli test tyre, but it's just another slower lap, unfortunately. This has to be the most boring practice 2 session we've had in so long, gotta say. Ewok says, again, this stream and chat is more entertaining than what's happening out on track. Cheers for that. Turbo, isn't Schwartzman Russian also? His T72 sponsorship has probably tainted him also. Yeah, I was saying that earlier. It's not helped his chances of an F1 seat now because he's Russian. Because of what do you call it? Because of the sanctions and the banning of Russian athletes and people in general from certain things, which not in all cases is justified. For example, the Russian and Belarusian tennis players that were banned from Wimbledon, I thought was the wrong decision, because I thought it was just the wrong message that they were putting out there, and they're not to blame at all for what's happened, and also have no connection to the actual people that are in the war. At least with Nikita Mazepin, his father, an oligarch, had connections to Putin, so you could actually, connect the dots there. But with the Russian and Belarusian tennis players, you couldn't exactly say that they're, secret government agents or anything, or that they're, in cahoots with the wrong people. But, yeah, that's what happened with them. As the Red Bull, I think, of Perez there continues on, or I think it might be Verstappen, I'm not sure. Wasn't really paying attention, to be honest. As we've almost got 30 minutes to go in practice 2. And one thing I will say quickly before I read out any more comments is, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because I'll be live tomorrow for 6.5 hours at least. I'll be starting at 6 PM UK time for my qualifying preview. Then at 7:45 PM, I'll be UK time. I'll then be doing my practice 3 watch along until 9 PM. 9 PM to 11 PM, I'll be doing the build up to qualifying. And then from 11 PM UK time until midnight, I will be doing the qualifying watch along. And then for at least half an hour after qualifying finishes, I'll be reacting with you guys to the session itself. So make sure to join me for that tomorrow. And again, if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for that. And for everyone watching right now, don't forget to smash that like button to, of course, help the channel in its growth. And just looking at Twitter to see if there's any news, because there's nothing happening really on the track. Giovinazzi saying he believes an F1 return is possible. He says, for sure it doesn't help the crash, but from the other side, I showed already in F1 what he could do. And he knows it's not up to 1 lap, but, well, it wasn't great, was it? Putting the car out of action for the rest of the session. And, yeah, Carlos Sainz is on track right now, just doing a lap. And, yeah, can't see any other news at the minute on what is, unfortunately, quite a boring Friday practice day. Turbo, also the Vietnam GP is dead, isn't it? Yeah, it's dead, unfortunately. It's because the people organising that race were found, I think, to be criminals or fraudsters, something like that. Which is a shame, because it would have been great to race in a place that, you know, has not really seen, you know, too many sporting events in the, you know, in history in general. Would have been great for Vietnam and Hanoi, but yeah, didn't happen. And unfortunately, because of the COVID pandemic, it does make racing in Asia a bit more difficult and less viable from now on, given how, you know, the COVID pandemic has just completely changed the world. So, yeah. As Logan Sargent is currently now in the Sky F1 combox talking to Danica Patrick and Rachel Brooks. He did a decent job in practice, and yeah, we'll probably see him racing for Williams next year. Be interesting to see how he does. I know obviously Liberty Media are pushing for him very hard to be an F1 because he's an American driver. And if he does do well against Albon, then yeah, he will have a lot of opportunities in F1. Unfortunately, because of where he's from, but that is the reality of the situation at the end of the day. As we're looking at Ricciardo there on the Pirelli test tyre, now we cut to a fan who looks like a fat version of him doing a shoey in the crowd with a shirt on that looks like it's a shirt of the Australian flag. Good to see. I'm just trying to see if there's any news maybe I can bring you guys. And no, can't find anything at the minute. Is China back on the list for next year? Yeah. Chinese Grand Prix is back for next year. I think it's the 4th race of the calendar. Is it the 4th race? Yeah, 4th race of the calendar. I think it's Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Australia, then China. Still not 100% we are going to be racing in China because they haven't held any sporting events, really. I mean, I know they did the Winter Olympics, but it was basically a dystopian Winter Olympics, the way they held it. And they had was it one of the skiing tracks next or in the middle of like a nuclear facility? It looked like I don't know, like a COD map or something. Yeah, we'll see. As Max Verstappen is talking to Brad Pitt in the Red Bull garage. And yeah, Verstappen doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. But yeah, back to what do you call it? What was I going to say? The Chinese Grand Prix. At the minute it's on, but we're not sure it's definitely going to be on. I think, to be honest, at this point, I think we'll be racing in China next year. Even if there's still a bit of a risk COVID-wise, I think they'll still force the Grand Prix to happen. Because, Liberty needs their money. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. And the only races in Asia next year, China and Japan. And I think the Japanese Grand Prix. Oh no, Singapore as well, obviously. How could I forget? I think the Japanese Grand Prix next year is at the end of September. So, yeah, slightly different date there. A couple of weeks sooner, I think it is, than this year's Japanese Grand Prix. As we're looking at Zhou on a lap on the Pirelli test tyre, and we've got, 25 minutes to go. Surely we are going to get some sort of action here, because this has been the most boring practice session of all time. I mean, it's not boring for the people at the track, because obviously they don't really know what's going on with the lap times anyway, and they won't really care too much, because it is Friday practice, so really all they care about is, like, looking at the cars and watching them. But for us TV viewers, this is brutal. As Zhou, continues around. But someone just go out there, bolt on a set of soft tyres and do something. Because this session is painfully bad. And I know, obviously, they're trying to do, 2023 tyre testing, but does it really have to go on for an hour? They've been doing this basically for an hour. This, testing on this tyre. So, come on, let's see something, please. As there's Fred Vassar on the Alfa Romeo pit wall. Obviously, the team principal of Alfa Romeo. Probably going to be team principal of Sauber still in a couple of years when they become Sauber again. And maybe it'll be team boss still when Sauber are backed up by Audi in 2026, which we expect that announcement to come by the end of the year as to who Audi will partner up with. Most likely, we still think again it will be Sauber, but you never know. Could be McLaren, which would be exciting, but risky on McLaren's side, to be honest, given that Audi have never, ever entered F1. But if Audi do show any signs of greatness with their power unit when we get to the next set of big regs in 2026, I can guarantee you teams like McLaren and Aston Martin, they will be desperate for a partnership with Audi. So we'll see how that goes. Audi actually came out and said, I think, a couple of days ago that their aim is to win races within their first 3 years, which is ambitious to say the least. As Latifi is on a not a flying lap. I just saw, though, he had smoke coming out the back of his car then in between turn 13, 14, 15 for some, and he's got more smoke coming out the back of his car. Not a lot of smoke, but you can clearly see it on the exit of slow corners. Let's see if we can see it again. No, maybe it's I don't know, the car bottoming out a bit too much. As we've got most cars now in the pits, and we wait for something to happen. Turbo asks if I remember right, they raced in South Africa back in 80s or 90s. Yeah, the last South African Grand Prix was 1993 at Kyalami, wasn't it? Let me just quickly check. We are possibly going to the South African Grand Prix in 2024. And yeah, it was. Kyalami. First race of 1993. I actually went back and watched that race a while ago. And if you can go and find that race, if you put in, I don't know, 1993 South African GP full race on Google and find it, watch it because the battle between Senna, Prost, Schumacher in that race was unbelievably good. It was a classic Grand Prix. But then, all of a sudden, we stopped racing there. For whatever reason. It's weird with that as well, because we returned, or not we, but F1 returned to South Africa after the apartheid era ended. You know, started racing there for a couple of years, and then suddenly it was back off the calendar again. So I have no idea what happened there. Let me look actually, because Sky F1 have gone to an ad break now. Let me look to see, you know, what the actual problem was there. Yeah, can't see anything on Wikipedia at the minute. Let me have a further look quick. No, can't see any reason why. They just, I don't know, not racing there for whatever reason. Maybe South Africa just didn't want to pay the money. Yeah, political lack of money, something like that. If F1 goes back to South Africa, will it be at Kyalami? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Let me not Google, but let me look on racefans.net. Because normally if you put in a search term, you'll get things related to it. And yeah, Kyalami is the track that they want to race at. And it was said in February of 2021, according to the CEO of the South African Grand Prix, that a revival was more likely to happen in 2023 than 2022. But now we are waiting until 2024. So, yeah. And Hamilton earlier this year told F1 announce return of South Africa next after Las Vegas joins the calendar. And also said he's pushing a lot for that race to be on the calendar. It would be great to go to South Africa. It used to be on the calendar for years. Let me go and look how many Grand Prix we had there. I think in 1983, I think it was, we had a title decider there where Nelson Piquet won his second world championship. I think that 1983 race, I think, was like a 3-way title decider. Yeah, we had a few races there in the 60s. Every year in the 80s there was a race. For some reason the 1981 one was a non-championship, but then 82, 83, 84, 85 was on the calendar. Then it was cancelled because of apartheid, and then 92 and 93 back on the calendar, and then gone again. So yeah, it was a permanent fixture of the calendar a long time ago, and it would be great to see it back. But yeah, we'll see. That's all I can say. We'll see. And yeah, Sky F1 gone to an ad break, so yeah, I'll let you guys know what happens when they come back from it. Hopefully something actually happens, because we've only got 17 minutes to go. Just trying to see if there's anything on Twitter I can bring you guys in terms of news. Yeah, I can't see anything. Unfortunately, as we now come back from the ad break, and still we have absolutely no proper running. Turbo says, I'd like to go back to Portugal. It would be nice to go back to that Grand Prix. I thought the 2 Portuguese Grand Prix we got were very good. The 2020 race I thought was a very good race. Obviously the start of that race was mental. I also thought the 2021 race was pretty good as well. It was just a bit too easy to overtake into turn 1. The DRS was just a bit too powerful. So with that Portimao track, if they just shorten the DRS zone by, I don't know, a couple 100 meters maybe, or 150 meters, I think it would make a good difference and would make it a bit more exciting. And obviously, with these cars, they can follow a lot better. And the 2 races we had there was with cars that can't follow as well as those ones. Or these ones, sorry. As we are looking at George Russell continuing around on the test tyre. To be honest, at this point, if we do get any like proper soft tyre single lap runs, like quali simulation runs, it's probably going to be at the very end of the session. But I think there's a chance here they won't even do that at all, which I've got to be honest is so disappointing. I know, again, Pirelli need to test, but do they need the entire session? Is that really necessary? As looks as though that Aston Martin of Sebastian Vettel is done for the day. A lot of work going on to that car towards the front brake suspension area, or the braking area, and some work going on towards the rear end of the car as well. So looks as though Sebastian Vettel is done. And I think they're trying to remove the rear wing as well. So yeah, it looks as though Vettel is done for the day, which is a shame. Right, let me find some other comments here in the chat. Turbo says, maybe they were worried about crime and this race spectator / tourist. I shortly dated a girl from South Africa. She said the crime was terrible. She was a racist, though. Well, forgetting that she was, a racist or whatever. What do you call it? Yeah, South Africa has had a crime problem for years. It's been quite well documented by, several news organizations from right wing to left wing. Doesn't really matter. And yeah, it's been an issue, and I think that's definitely, been a reason. I think Formula E, aren't they racing there next year in Cape Town, or maybe they already have raced there for this year? I can't remember. I don't follow Formula E that closely, to be honest. But yeah, it's definitely an issue behind holding an F1 race, because you don't want the possibility of something bad happening. Saying that, we race still in Brazil, and the crime in Sao Paulo is horrendous. Literally, as the cars, or as the drivers and team members leave in cars from the circuit to go to the hotel, the amount of stories of drivers being, not drivers, but team members and people being robbed and held at gunpoint for, jewelry, money, whatever. I think there was a story, was it Jenson Button in 2010 for McLaren? It was held at gunpoint, I think, for a watch or something, was it? Or something like that. And then I think 3 or 4 years ago, it happened again, where we had, was it? I think it might have been a test driver or something. Maybe Esteban Gutierrez or something was held at gunpoint. And we still raced there. So, yeah. As usual, F1, hypocritical in their standards for what you need to meet to host an F1 race. They'll use the reasoning for, a certain reasoning for why a certain country can't have a Grand Prix, but then, that same reasoning is happening in a country where they do have a Grand Prix. So, at the end of the day, if you want to host a Grand Prix in your particular part of the world, you need a massive financial package, really. That's what Liberty Media care about, money. Nothing else. As we're looking at Daniel Ricciardo. who is continuing on a test tyre run. And yeah, we wait to see if there will be any proper, soft tyre, low fuel running, but I'm losing hope. Giuliano De Cesa, who I mentioned yesterday, who is a FIA accredited journalist, has reported an hour ago that Leclerc will take a fresh new power unit tomorrow and will start the race from the back. And then he also says Carlos Sainz will not be taking a new power unit this weekend, so he will be starting from wherever he qualifies. And the journalist there, Giuliano De Cesa, he's pretty reliable when it comes to news in regards to Ferrari. And that Leclerc starting from the back for this weekend's race has been reported by other journalists as well, so it seems pretty plausible to me. As Ricciardo continues on with this lap, and lapping 5.5 seconds down. The annoying thing about this, all this heavier fueled running, is because they're on the Pirelli test tyre, we don't actually know if these lap times from any particular drivers or teams are any good or anything like that, because we don't know what type of compound they're on in comparison to each other as well. So, yeah. No, Portugal next year. Yeah, it's not on the calendar, unfortunately. Thing is, though, and let me just quickly look so I can make sure I am correct when I say this. I think the Spanish Grand Prix contract for them to be on the calendar is up at the end of next year. So maybe if Spain isn't on the calendar in 2024, maybe Portugal will replace it. We'll see. But, yeah. By the way, just reading on the Wikipedia that if, Russia didn't do what they did to Ukraine, that obviously the Russian Grand Prix would be on the calendar now, and it was, for this, not this year, but next year, it was going to switch to a new venue, the Igora Drive in Novosylovo, wherever that is. Apparently 34 miles from St. Petersburg. So, yeah, that was thankfully short-lived. As Aston Martin finally are pitting, put the driver on an actual compound of tyre we're using, but unfortunately, they're not going to bring Stroll back out onto track because it looks as though he's being wheeled back in to the garage, as we've only got 7 minutes to go in practice 2. Apologies, by the way, about how shit this session has been, but obviously I have no control over that. And yeah, at this point, I don't think we're going to see any, proper quali runs, which is really frustrating. Let me just quickly look, actually, on Pirelli's, because I want to make sure I wasn't, mistaken, and maybe this session was only supposed to be about the 2023 tyres. Let me have a look. So Pirelli said that this extra 30 minutes session has been arranged as a way of getting in tyre testing mileage for next year without needing extra sessions outside the race weekends. My impression was that the extra half an hour would be, really useful towards the start of the session, to give them, that extra time. And that once we got to the final, 35, 40 minutes, we'd get some proper running. But that is not the case, clearly. They are just running and running forever on these tyres. One thing we might see next year, hopefully we do see next year, is a better Pirelli tyre, because the Pirelli tyres this year haven't been the best. The drivers have complained that they don't have a lot of bite on the front tyres. And obviously there has been quite a lot of tyre warm-up issues this season with not just Mercedes but other teams as well. So, yeah, we'll see what their tyres are like next year. I mean, if they had a lot more bite overall, but also wore out a bit quicker, that would be, I think, better for next year. I think these tyres, I mean, they do wear out, quite a lot. I'm not going to say that they're not like Bridgestone tyres, which just go on forever and ever. Or that's what they were like before Pirelli came about in 2011. But the 2022 Pirelli tyres, they're not really, they don't wear out that much compared to other years. Like, I mean, if you go only back to 2020, where in that year we only had the 2019 tyres for that season because Pirelli fucked up massively in their design for the 2020 tyre. That year we had, I think, the ideal amount of tyre wear from the Pirelli tyres, and it caused us to have, 2-stop races pretty much every Grand Prix. As Gunter Steiner there on the Haas pit wall smiling at the 2 Haas fans in the crowd wearing the Gunter Steiner shirts. Let's see if there's any news I can find on Twitter quickly. And can't see anything, unfortunately. Anders Ericsson, let's have some nice pics of the new Haas look. Tomorrow I will make sure to show it. It is a nice look towards the rear end of the Haas car. And also, I will show the... is it the livery that Williams are going to be running? Is it this weekend? I don't think we've quite seen it today, but I think they've got a new livery as well. Is it Williams or Haas? I can't remember exactly, but I think one of the teams have got like a very nice looking livery. As the teams continue on with their long runs. Ricciardo's done 38 laps in this session, which is a lot. So that's almost, that's 3/4 of a race distance around here. 56 laps it'll be on Sunday. Looking at the current lap times, though, these times as well, they are not representative at all of what we're going to see on Sunday, because they're normally the best lap times when they do longer runs in FP2 will be, 4 to 5 seconds slower than their best FP2 times. They're way slower than that. The best FP2 times in this session have been way off the best FP1 times, but they're like, 7 or 8 seconds off the pace. It's very slow pace they're at right now, to be honest, as we enter, finally, the final 2 minutes of this session, which, to be honest, has been pretty boring. And can't wait for it to end, sadly. But it has been great, obviously, to chat to you guys, and I hope to see all you guys tomorrow for another long qualifying day. And obviously tomorrow we'll get some more action with qualifying itself. I will admit, though, my qualifying preview is going to be very difficult to do. Because, well, what is there to preview? You could definitely say. May have to look at just the practice 1 times. There's even a chance, I've got to be honest, I think there's a chance I might not even do a qualifying preview at all tomorrow. I might just start with practice 3 and then do that. I'll let you guys know, though. But, yeah, it's not great what we've had today. But it is, though, quite common what you will get towards the end of the season with practice sessions is they get a lot less representative and a lot more pointless, really. So, yeah. But if I do decide, guys, to not do the qualifying preview tomorrow, then, and, you know, just do practice 3, then the build up to qualifying, then qualifying, and then, you know, just do that, I will let you guys know beforehand on my community tab and I'll post it in Discord as well, so you guys know. But I'll have a think about it and see if, you know, there's anything we can salvage from what's happened today to do a qualifying preview. But to be honest, my thinking at the moment is I'm probably not going to do one. I'm probably just going to do practice 3 watch along, and then build up to qualifying watch along, reaction to that, and then probably, you know, that's it for tomorrow. That's probably what I'm going to do, I'm afraid. Because, yeah, what we've had today has been, yeah, pretty bad. As the session has finished, and I may as well just go through and read out the final order because everyone's basically finished the session. So Charles Leclerc ends up quickest for Ferrari. Valtteri Bottas ends up in second with Ricciardo third. Sainz 4th, Schumacher 5th, Norris 6th, Verstappen 7th, Hamilton 8th, Gasly 9th, Perez 10th, and then Magnussen, Tsunoda, Russell, Zhou, Stroll, Ocon, Alonso, Albon, Vettel, Latifi is your final finishing order for practice 2 at the US Grand Prix. Make sure, guys, to join me tomorrow for my content. At the moment, actually, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to say it now. I'm not going to do my qualifying preview tomorrow. I'm not going to bother doing it because from what we've seen today, guys, there's nothing to really cover. We haven't had anything happen, really. So, yeah, I'm not going to do a qualifying preview tomorrow. So this is the new plan. 7:45 p.m. UK time, I'll be going live for the practice 3 watch along until 9 p.m. Then 9 to 11 p.m. we'll be doing the build up to qualifying. 11 p.m. UK time until midnight, we'll be doing the qualifying watch along. And then for at least half an hour after the session finishes, we'll be doing a reaction to the session itself. Apologies again that I'm not going to be doing a qualifying preview, but there's nothing to go off of, which, you know, the qualifying preview needs to actually happen, really, at the end of the day. Sorry about that, but that's what's going to happen. So, again, remember, I'm not going live at 6 p.m. UK time tomorrow anymore. It will be 7:45 p.m. UK time. Make sure to remember that. So, yeah, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and come around for that tomorrow. For everyone still watching, don't forget to smash the like button to help the channel with its growth. And as well, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 and join my Discord server. Link below in the description for more content like this. But guys, until my practice 3 watch along, qualifying watch along, and my coverage of qualifying day at the Circuit of Americas in Austin, Texas, it has been me, Chancellor HD. Goodbye.